We would like to begin with the first item in today's program, which is panel discussion entitled Remote Learning, Best Practices for Online Delivery in Higher Learning Institution. The chairperson for this session is Mr. Hasnain Zafar Balot. Before we begin, I would like to inform that the panels are happy to receive any questions from the audience during the discussion. So please leave your question in the chat room or turn on your microphone to speak. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Hasnain Zafar to begin the session.
Thank you, Nurul. Assalamu alaikum and very good morning to everybody. This is our second day. First day actually went very well. It was great fun learning new things, even my own self. Okay, so it's a pleasure to be chair for a panel discussion. And can I have Devansh here? We are waiting for our third panelist, who is, and it's a great honor to actually chair a session where Prof. Abdul Karim is there and Associate Professor Dr. Nilesh. And we are waiting for our third panelist. Can I get confirmation? Okay, Devansh is there. Great. Okay, so let's start. Just to brief you all, this panel discussion will be in such a format that everybody will get 15 minutes, around 15 minutes, to share your ideas on remote learning, and you could share your best practices. Okay, and after 15 minutes of each speaker, we will have a question and answer session. Okay, so let's start with our first panelist, Prof. Abdul Karim. Prof. Abdul Karim Ilyas is a professor of food technology at School of Industrial Technology, University Science Malaysia, and current director of the Center for Development of Academic Excellence. He has been recognized as top 50 educators in Asia Pacific in the year 2015 by Terrapin Asia, and has been awarded with Malaysia's Rising Star 2015 award, highest research citation in agricultural sciences and food technology, food science and technology. Malaysia Research Star Award 2016, 2017, and 2018, and the world's most influential scientific minds by Clarivate Analytics. At national level, he is a master trainer for ACEP and involved as a writer for Malaysian Education Blueprint 2015 to 2025, higher education. He is actually part of the MOOC committee at national level. He's the one who started micro-credential at USM. He's a great advocate of technology in teaching and learning. So let me give Prof. Abdul Karim the floor, and you have 15 minutes to share your ideas.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hasnain. Can you hear me? Loud and clear. Okay.
Yes, Prof.
Let me share my PowerPoint. Okay, once again, thank you very much, Dr. Hasnain, and also IMU for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here and to share this topic on topic given to me within these 15 minutes on remote learning best practices for online delivery in higher learning institutions. I'll be sharing some of what I've been doing this semester, especially because I'm teaching one course this semester. Not necessarily it is, I wouldn't call it best practices, but these are some of the practices that I've been using. So, you know, if you think it's a good idea to try out in your own classroom, by all means. These are some of the things that I've been reading from, I would say, some of the evidence-based research in terms of engaging students online. So basically, within these 15 minutes, I would like to share a few approaches to online learning and sharing some ideas that maybe, you know, you'll find some of these you can adopt and adapt in your own context, in your own course. I would like to start by sharing some guiding principles. First of all, I think in order to be qualified to teach online or to be competent to teach online, we ourselves, the teachers, the lecturers, the educators, first, we must experience being on the other side, the learner's side, the student's side. So therefore, if we have no experience, be an online student or taking any online courses, then that would be a good point to start. First, be a learner in online courses. Because when we teach online, just like in face-to-face situation, we really need to understand the situation of being a learner or a student. We have to put ourselves in their shoes, you know. So we have to be more empathetic. But how can we be more empathetic if we don't understand how the students in online environment learn? So in order for us to change the way we teach online, first we need to understand how the students feel and experience being, on the other side. So be a learner in online courses. First, take, a few courses online. Try to go through, even if you don't complete it, but at least you have experience what it takes to be a student in online environment, and therefore, once we have that experience, we can take that experience, and when we plan and design our course, as a teacher now, we always keep the students first. We always recall that experience being a student and use that experience to help us to design our course. And this is one post.
Sorry to intervene. I
Yes.
think we are not seeing your slideshow mode. We are seeing your slides.
You are seeing my slides?
Yeah. So if you could convert it into slideshow mode.
This is already slideshow.
But I think it's a different screen. The screen we are seeing is your slide PowerPoint application.
Okay. Let me.
Sorry
try.
for this
Yes, okay,
interruption.
okay. Let me try again. Maybe I can. Yeah, let me share my desktop instead of my PowerPoint.
Yes, now.
Now you can see.
Yeah, great.
So I'm sorry about that.
Continue. Sorry for interrupting.
Okay. Okay, this is one. Okay, previously actually I showed this slide. So first, be a learner in online courses. Then this one post, very good post from my friend here. How do I become a better virtual teacher? I want to read this very fast. The best way to learn is to attend a lot of online courses, online classes, sign up for a lot of MOOCs, and just experience various delivery styles as a participant. Sometimes as facilitators, teachers, lecturers, trainers, and coaches, we are blind to the learning experience because we are not on the receiving end. So a good leader is also a good follower. Likewise, a good teacher is also a good student. Fortunately, there are many free courses, webinars, and classes being offered now. This is a fantastic opportunity to learn from the best and how they conduct their engagements online. That's the reason why we must first be an online student. Take as many online courses as possible, especially from those who have been doing online for a long time, and see how they do it, how they design the course, how they deliver, how they engage the students, how they do the assessment. All these things are very, very important for us, and we can use that as a model that we can follow when we design our own course. So pick up best practices and learn new tools to incorporate in your repertoire. Soon enough, you will create a solid teacher brand for yourself that will attract people to learn from you. I think these are very good way of putting this, that to reiterate my point just now, first be a learner, then only be a teacher. So a lot of time when we talk about online learning, people focus on technology. So don't be blinded by technology. Technology is an enabler. Technology is a tool. And I always say this again and again, a fool with a tool is still a fool. So this model, SAMR model, SAMR here, stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. If we want to use technology in the most impactful manner, in the most effective way, read about and study this model, because we want to use the technology in such a way that we can be at this two level here, modification, and the highest level here is redefinition. Just like in Bloom taxonomy, when we talk about the cognitive engagement, we want to go to the highest level, not only at the low level of cognitive domain in Bloom taxonomy, but we want to take the students to the highest level to engage them cognitively, so that they are able to apply the critical thinking, they are able to synthesize and create something tangible. So the same thing as when we use technology in an online environment, we need to, try to strive to reach this level where we modify and we redefine how we use technology to achieve the most impactful way, and to use technology in a very purposeful manner. So learn to integrate technology purposefully and effectively. The second guiding principle here is, teaching online, transitioning from face-to-face to online requires a change of mindset, a change of paradigm. So to me, it's very important for educators as well as students, both students and teachers, both should have a different kind of mindset and change of paradigm. Then students as well as teachers need to acquire a new skill set so that they are able and they are competent to, to do online teaching and online learning. The pedagogy aspect and the andragogy aspect, now the teachers are even more critical now, the lecturers or the teachers, to understand more how to adopt the principles of the pedagogy and andragogy in the online environment. The pedagogical content knowledge as well, how to teach the subject more effectively, and learn some of the tools and tricks of the trade in online teaching. And the third one is practice. We have to practice and practice. And to the extent that at some point it becomes effortless, you feel very comfortable and you can do a lot of things without, adding stress, more and more stress to yourself. So when we talk about the best practices in online teaching and online learning, I think first of all, start with the student in mind, put the students first. Okay, put the students first as a focus, and from there we can design our course, keeping in mind that we want to achieve the learning outcome, the constructive alignment is there, but the bottom line is the students is the one who, the bottom line is they have to learn and achieve whatever the learning outcome that we have set out for the course. So we have to understand our learners. Of course, they are adult learners in most cases, in our case. So they are adults, therefore they have some life experience, they have some preconception, they are autonomous learners, self-directed learners. So these are the things that we need to understand, because this is where we have to apply what we understand about the adult learning principles in the context of online environment. So know your students. I cannot stress more about the importance of knowing our students first. Who are they? So we can do a simple survey asking them, knowing more about them. Where are they? What devices they are using to access their online learning, and what's their learning environment like? Remember, they are isolated in their house, and we don't know how the environment in their house, whether they are comfortable, whether they have all the necessary, equipment, connection, and so on to learn comfortably. So we cannot simply, take it for granted. We have to get this information for the students group that we are, teaching. So when we talk about the connection, if you get some information from them, we have to consider the lowest denominator in terms of the speed of the internet. Okay, so we may have to redesign our course in such a way that we can deliver for low speed connection, low bandwidth connection. So these are one of the important things if you are reaching them, mostly through online. Of course, if there are students who cannot be reached online, then they have to consider other ways maybe we have to go back to the traditional open distance learning modes, So we need to rethink our instructional strategy. And this is where we have to be very creative. And when we approach the online learning, we have to balance the synchronous and the asynchronous, portion appropriately. And think of less is more. So we need to be able to judge when less is more, but when more sometimes is desirable. Okay. So I always stress this point that in online delivery, don't focus too much on covering the syllabus. I think we need to flip that kind of mindset. Remember, a change of mindset is necessary here. Don't focus so much on covering the syllabus, but let us design or redesign the whole course in such a way through a series of learning activities and so on, so that we can engage students to let them do, to let them think, let them solve the problem. And in the process of doing all this, they will uncover the content. They will learn the content through, engaging in the learning activities that we have designed for them. So this, I want to share with you this book, How Learning Works, 7 research-based principles for smart teaching. Principle number 7 here, how do students become self-directed learner? So we need to educate and teach our students now to be more independent, to be kind of self-directed and self-regulated learners as well. Okay, so we need to design more activities for cognitive engagement. So I have about 3 minutes left here. I want to share some of what I'm doing this semester actually. So this is my course, the course that I'm teaching now. As you can see here, my course, when we go synchronous online session, I will engage them basically through a series of activities that would engage them cognitively. So I call this activity, put your thinking hat. And in the asynchronous portion, I have designed for them, content and so on that they can go through. So I'll give them the instruction of what they need to do before we have the synchronous session. So during the synchronous session, I will use the time actually to discuss problems. And these problems, of course, are designed to align with the learning outcome. Okay. So this was yesterday, the screen that you are seeing on the screen here. This was 2-hour session yesterday. So we were actually discussing these questions. I, get them into the breakout room, into groups. The group has been formed before that. So they will discuss the questions and then they will come back and they will engage in the discussion. Okay. And another activity that I did yesterday was using this tool called Socrative, where I give them, a set of MCQ questions. And again, they do this in group. So they discuss first in the breakout room, and then they answer individually. They answer individually. Okay. So these are some of the activity that I have 1 more minute here. And in the asynchronous session, we engage them through a series of activities, and you have to be, engaging them most of the time so that they will do the necessary activities that we have designed for them. This is another activity that I want to share with you based on the mind map that they have created. So in 1-hour session, actually, we go through this mind map and we discuss all the points related to this particular topic. And I get them also to tweet, to share the tweets on the particular topics. So these are examples of the tweets that they have shared. And to me, I get them to create content together. So it's kind of a concept of crowdsourcing here to build the content of the course together. So we empower them to take the responsibility to create the content for the course. So I will stop at this point. Maybe later on, if there's any question, I can go further and expand on this more. Thank you very much, Class 9. Over to you.
Thanks, Prof. So let me introduce now our second panelist, our own Director of Learning Resources, IMU Learning Resources, Associate Professor Dr. Nilesh Kumar Mitra. Dr. Nilesh Kumar Mitra is Director Learning Resources and Associate Dean of Technology Enhanced Learning at International Medical University. He is actively associated with guiding research projects on neurotoxicology and application of stem cell in neurological disorders. In medical education, his principal work is on application of computer-based formative assessment and development of integrated medical museum sessions, IMMS, which is an e-learning tool in anatomy used by students to identify anatomical structures during practical sessions. His work on IMMS brought him University Achievement Award in year 2017 and Best Presentation Award in Mahim's Medical Education Conference. He likes to use technology enhanced learning and assessment in the IMU curriculum. So over to Dr. Nilesh. You have 15 minutes to share your thoughts. Thanks.
I cannot share. I think Prof. Karim has to answer.
Yeah, Prof. Karim, could you stop sharing?
Yeah, where is the, I'm looking for.
On top maybe. There is a bar, you need to.
Yeah. Just hold on. Doesn't appear.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, I've stopped sharing, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Prof. Thanks. Yes, Dr. Nilesh, you could share.
Yeah. So I think you can see my slide, isn't it?
Yes. Could you make it in pop full screen? Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah. Very good morning to Prof. Karim. Thanks for joining the LRF. We are really grateful to you, and thanks, Mr. Asnan, for kind introduction, and also Devangs for kindly participating and giving the students' view in this important discussion, because all of us has really suffered during MCO, and particularly later on, we gathered a lot of momentum, and now I think we are in a balanced position in IMU. IMU started e-learning a long back, but no doubt if you compare with the international scenario, as you see in this short MCQ, I hope you can see that the correct answer is C, okay? And regarding the diversity of the online applications in education, synchronous, asynchronous, open online courses, private online courses, and M-learning, but no doubt it depends on what courses you are teaching, but there are some myths and facts. I just want to maybe some opinion on your end, because many professors still feel that there are very minimum resources required for online learning. Online learning is not effective. It does not actually maintain the outcomes which is usually can be observed in face-to-face, and it requires less lecturer. So if you feel that actually go to the ground situation, it requires a lot of input and lot of resources rather than face-to-face learning. Not only that, if you look at the views, a very recent view by Inside Higher Ed Survey, that professors usually feel that through online courses, the students' learning outcome cannot be achieved same as that of face-to-face. And this percentage in 2016 was 55%, very fortunate. And particularly now with the advent of COVID, I think it will be much more better. Now only 36% of the professors disagree in that position. So I think ground situation is naturally improving. Teaching with technology, you must be clear about, as Prof. Karim already mentioned, that what are the students, where are you teaching, what is their composition, what is their background knowledge. That is very, very important. You should know the learner and learner analytic, their learning style, their environment, at what stage of teaching learning capability they are having, whether they are syncing with your tool or not is very important. Now, as I am teaching in the health science and medical and dental curricula, so I will think it as a more of performance objective, because more and more of our courses are skills based rather than knowledge and cognitive based. So learning environment, finding out proper teaching learning strategies and method, particularly when you are teaching in skills-based teaching, select technology, evaluate and revise. Now, usually in IMU, there are a lot of framework, but from our e-learning aspect, we find that regarding designing, ADDIS is quite good. Analysis, design, develop, implement, and no doubt, don't forget to evaluate. And developing content, Gangnes 9 event is still old and gold. You gain attention, in inform learner of the objective, present content in a chunked way, elicit performance, provide feedback, assess learning performance at the end. Now, as Prof. Karim has also mentioned, and during our MCO situation in IMU also, we find out that one of the important things we should not forget is the learning style, needs and environment. In the right side picture, you can see that this is a summer vacation has ended and a primary school lecturer has already come, and she has asked to write the students about their summer vacation experience in a mobile device. Some are telling, I am not synced, I have no Wi-Fi connection, my battery is dead. So I again emphasize on learning style, needs and environment. Now, one of the model I found quite compatible in online learning is cognitive presence, social presence and teaching presence. This is called community of inquiry model. And cognitive presence and teaching presence is more of for us, and social presence is for not only student but also university as a whole. I'll describe why I am telling not only student, also as university. Now, regarding cognitive presence, as I have already told in Gangnes 9 models, you have to trigger the event by video, by questions, by scenario, explore the content. But remember here, compared to the face-to-face, there is some difference. Particularly, you should park your lesson outcome slightly before in certain areas where students usually easily go. If you think that the students usually does not go to LMS, put it in the WhatsApp or put it in the Teams. The main idea should be, it should be student friendly, and compared to the face-to-face lesson in online lesson, prior learning of the students about the outcome is very, very important. And no doubt you have to chunk out the lesson outcome. For example, if you are giving 8 outcomes in face-to-face, I don't think within 1 hour online lecture, you cannot give all the outcome. So as Prof. Karim already mentioned, and even MQA during the directive, during the MC also agreed that we should chunk our content, we should reduce the content and go to need to know basis, integrate the content and ultimately give some clinical scenarios, allow them to applicate so that all the different outcomes you've already stated can be integrated at the end. Now, next part is social presence. And social presence, there are 3 components: student-student interaction, student content interaction, and student-teacher interaction. In IMU, we mostly do it in LMS, but I feel that many of the lecturers, apart from LMS, they are doing outside LMS also. I find out these 3 tools quite effective. One is Edpuzzle, where you download videos from YouTube, you customize, add questions, assign to the students, or for seminar presentation, for workshop presentation for the student, voice thread is very, very effective. And no doubt, age old, all of us always using Padlet. Now coming to the LMS, does LMS subserve only for providing instruction? I disagree. I found these 4 models: academic support, technology support, sense of community, and health and well-being. Student service department has got a very, very important role in online learning. When the student come in the semester 1, orientation, online counseling, they are coming from different types of pre-university courses. We do not know what is their background about knowledge and their adaptability to the online environment. Scaffolding to increase technological competency. In this aspect, student representative council has got a very, very important role. So student readiness, indicators of readiness are technical skills, time management. Semester 1 student, they come there and you give 3 online learning lecture one day, and how much time they have to grasp those online learning when face-to-face lecturer is not available. So one of the important thing is not only about time management, availability of the lecturer in online mode. whatever is most syncing with your daily habits, whether it is WhatsApp, or whether it is Teams, you should find out that when the students have problem, they should easily approach it in whatever way they are comfortable and you are comfortable. Individual differences in the students' understanding, financial means 90% of our students survive on data connection. And in IMU, one day lecture, they usually spend 7 to 9 ringgit. Online self-efficacy is also important. And lastly, for our professional and skills-based training, one of the important things, we cannot go away in IMU without that, is simulation and skills-based training. Scenario-based, using digital avatars, simple flash-based simulations, and e-learning games. And our e-learning team goes like that. They find out objectives and expectations. They build the storyline, sitting side by side with the lecturer. They bring out characters and feedback and feedback and feedback, because in simulation learning, without feedback, students cannot learn. Now, we have experimented with the MOOC. At present, one of our MOOC is subserving in 8 countries. As you find, a Malaysian student is only 68%, but 32% of the student abroad, they are going through our travel medicine, which is done with our partners. And way forward, I should tell that we should reduce the degree courses from 12 to 13 week semester to 6 to 8 week semester to adapt to the online curricula. Students should be allowed to complete 1 unit at a time compared to 3 or 4 modules at a time, which is syncing with the online learning environment. Widespread use of MOOC by tertiary institution, flexible approach to the skills development, as we have got a lot of hindrance in going to the hospitals, intensive online learning environment. One of the important things which Prof. Karim has already mentioned, training of the lecturers, knowledge of the curricula and pedagogy, so that they can transfer their adaptability from the face-to-face to the online context, and no doubt making the students ready for online student readiness. Now I will end it here, but I want to share something else, which is from my online virtual experience in IMU. Can everybody see this?
Yes, Dr. Nish, we can see that.
Okay. So this is actually a virtual, there are several virtual tools we are in IMU we are using. This is about a Chinese patient, 50-year-old, presenting with excessive thirst. So how do you start? We start with
Hi, doctor.
history.
Hi, Mrs. Chong. What brings you to the clinic today? Doctor, I feel that I'm always thirsty. Since I'm having dry mouth, I drink a lot of water and urinate frequently. What do you think is causing you to be always thirsty? Is it because of the hot weather or you are doing a lot of hard work? No, I never go out or do hard work, but I'm always thirsty and at the same time, I'm also hungry. Mrs. Chong, do you think your symptoms are getting worse? Yes, I feel like it's getting worse. I eat and drink a lot, but I've noticed that I've lost a few pounds of weight recently, and on top of that, I feel weak and I have headache all the time. Since when have you had these symptoms? I started being aware of these symptoms about 1 to 2 weeks ago. Mrs. Chong, do you have any other problems? I've noticed that the cuts and sores on my skin are healing very slowly. I also feel numbness and tingling on my hands and feet. She does not have any urinary tract infection symptoms. She reports that she does not have any medical problems, but it has also been a long time since she last saw a doctor.
So now
She has a remarkable family history.
with the history
She neither smokes nor drinks.
Examination. So the students can check the BMI with the evidence given, can examine the general signs and symptoms, can go for heart and lung exam, can even go for additional part. For example, they can go for investigation. Options are given for auscultation of the heart, measurement of blood glucose, measurement of blood pressure, testing of peripheral neuropathy. For example, if they click on measurement of blood glucose, submit.
Let's see the results of laboratory investigation.
So you can see here random blood sugar is quite high, HbA1c is 7.5. Then you proceed there.
Let's see the short summary of the patient.
And then the student, after the scenario is given, the student is asked some questions. Now the students go to the forum. This is the actual forum. Semester 7 students in our clinical school continue with doing these questions. So you can see the forum, all the postings. And if the student do not complete the forum and then they go and try to finish, as you can see, they get only 1 star. But if the student continue all the forum activities, then they get 3 star. And at the end, you have to review. Your ability of the review, and also there are some questions, MCQ question at the end, which the students can also attempt. So thank you, and this is what we have been doing in IMU. And as I already told that during MCO, we have a stumbling block of suddenly our professional degree students cannot go to the hospital. So fortunately, we have started our e-learning very early in 1999, and with our best e-learning team guided by Mr. Hasnan, we have been developed a lot of such simulated clinical virtual sets, and that was actually severe during our MCO days. With this, I just conclude my talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Associate Prof. Dr. Nilesh Kumar. It was a very comprehensive, background about IMU remote learning, and I really like the virtual medical clinic scenario. And I think in the chat, there are a lot of people who discuss, and Prof. Karim also do agree that scenario-based learning, asking question, that would be a great, for learning. So now I would like to invite our own IMU student representative president, Council of IMU, President of Student Representative Council of IMU, Devansh Mitisha, and he's actually second year medical student, and he has experienced and utilized many learning resources during his time in IMU and has witnessed its evolution to what is today. As a student leader, he has led the charge to bring about many positive changes for student community. He has also been proactive and integral in the delivery of feedback from the student body to the faculty and staff to improve the teaching and learning experiences at IMU. Especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, his past and current awards are evidence to his passion, leadership, and compassion in improving the student learning experiences. So over to you, Dave. You have 15 minutes to share your experiences.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Hasnan, for the introduction. Thank you, Prof. Nilesh and Prof. Karim, for those very interesting, very informative talks and presentations. Do give me a moment to share my screen. All right, can I just confirm that as I enter into the presentation mode of the slides, are you seeing the presentation mode or are you seeing the application?
Yes, we are seeing your presentation mode.
All right, brilliant. So yes, allow me to begin. Good morning, everyone. I hope that you've all had your breakfast, and wow, we had a really, really great set of 2 talks today, and mine is the third. So this will be a little bit different from what we have heard just now. as this will be a little bit more from the student's perspective. And my part in this, as the president for the Student Representative Council, is ultimately to provide that student opinion and I guess you can call it a wish list. You can call it essentially what they would like to see, what they would like to experience when it comes to online teaching and learning, and essentially just like a summary, I guess, of their feedback as well going forward with this new platform that we are embracing. So, all right. So as an introduction, I believe that everybody here is aware of the context that we are in with the COVID-19 pandemic and how we needed to shift from something that was essentially a staple of every course and every program in IMU, which is like our lectures. Maybe for medical students, it's our clinical simulations, our MMS. We have practical and lab sessions that we go to. Everything has been face-to-face in the past. Visits into clinical visits or even visits to other institutions. And even our assessments were more on the closed book side, where we would essentially come to maybe the e-labs and carry out the exams, or maybe it's a pen and paper kind of exam. But nowadays we've noticed that given like the safety and the way that things have been these days, it's important to sort of go online to practice social distancing. When you come to campus, you need to wear a mask and ensure that you follow the proper regulations. And essentially, like this whole idea of health and safety has been really, really important. And it has sort of caused us to transition and see this like change and progress as we move away from the previous system to something that's more online based, where we've used platforms like Zoom right now, we've used MS Teams. And essentially, we have, yes, online lectures, online simulations, online lab sessions even, and alternative assignments, because we are unable to go to the clinics. It's not really that safe for certain types of clinics or hospitals. And the way that exams have progressed is also to something that's a little bit more online and proctored. So it's a little bit more in line with the fact that now we have all these online resources available. We are taking the assessments online, so that is the nature of the exams as well. And we've already witnessed like how we went from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 of like IMU's plan to implement widespread online learning and teaching for all the students so that they do not fall behind as we go through this pandemic and continue to learn and teach. So ultimately, we do notice that this is a new medium, so there will be new challenges for this. From the pro side of things, this is a good way to go about learning and teaching because in this context, it's safe. It is a lot more flexible in terms of how we can essentially use this platform and basically manage our commitments in with a little bit more freedom. And it's versatile in the sense that even if like maybe now that we have the COVID-19 pandemic as an example, essentially even if something were to change, maybe our whole environment were to change, we cannot sit together in a lecture theater and listen to lectures anymore, this platform is available for us to be able to do just that. And essentially it allows for a lot more independent learning because nowadays we've also seen a lot more lectures being recorded, a lot more sessions where you can essentially go back and refer to the resources, which took a lot more time to do if you were doing it in real life. And essentially this has allowed for a lot more independent learning, a lot more self-directed learning, which is already a step in the right direction, as we've been discussing earlier. And it's easily accessible. Anybody who has a sufficient internet connection, a laptop, and with camera and microphone is essentially able to participate in any of the sessions, any and every of the teaching and learning sessions that we've had. It's easily accessible in that sense that at least in this current situation, we're able to still access the content and learn from it. The cons, however, is of course going to be that there will be, when it comes to implementation at the very beginning, there are going to be costs, there is going to be infrastructure that needs to be put in place. Some people may need to upgrade their internet connections. Maybe they need to get faster computers, which they didn't realize they need to in the past, because now they need something that is essentially going to allow them to seamlessly connect to these online platforms and learn from them. It is time consuming in the sense that this implementation doesn't happen overnight. It will take time for people to get through this whole process of adapting to this new situation and learning from this new medium, whereas previously they were just listening to a lecture. Now they need to come online, they need to connect, and they need to essentially ensure that they're able to hear the lecture, they're able to see the lecture on their computers. So all of this does take time. So adaptation and re-education in terms of how to use these platforms is also important for the students to essentially learn and get accustomed to. And in terms of interactions and participation, essentially because students are in front of a computer now, maybe the environment may not be the most conducive, or maybe they're just uncomfortable with unmuting and giving like questions or participating in the discussion. So that does also take a hit when we look at going from this face-to-face to online learning medium. So essentially, here comes to the best practices that, and I have this broken out between teaching and learning. So essentially, the students' needs from the lecturers and the lecturers' needs from the students. So let's start with the students' needs. And a few of the things that they need usually when it comes to online learning and teaching is that they need their sessions to be purpose-driven. As what Prof. Karim has mentioned earlier, it is important that these sessions are student-centric, are student-directed, in the sense that whatever content that we have to deliver to them, it needs to be something that is relevant to them, something that's appropriate for them, and something that essentially we need to take the context of that these students, maybe they are looking at it for the first time, maybe they're only looking at it for the second or third time, and we do need to sort of adjust our content and our delivery of that content accordingly. Sometimes we need to be a little bit more guided. Sometimes we need to know when to stop and let them explore the content on their own. And that's why clear direction is also important. I know we talk about having learning objectives all the time when we have our lectures, and that's honestly a very, very good way of indicating clear direction when we talk about such, I guess, learning and teaching sessions where we have outcomes to follow. But essentially, to keep it a little bit more clear, maybe we can go back and come back to the learning outcomes at every step of the lecture, for example, just to ensure that students understand that, okay, this is the flow of things, and at least I'm not losing myself in any of these sessions. The direction is still there. And ultimately, we need to play to strengths of the different kinds of learners. Because we have visual learners, we're going to have kinesthetic learners, we're going to have auditory learners, and they're all going to learn through different ways. And ultimately, we need to play to the strengths of those different ways of learning. In terms of the context, I've mentioned this just now, is to do with the fact that now we're all online. We are essentially most of the time at home or in a place that's conducive for learning. But essentially, we all are apart, but still learning together on an online platform. And it's important to note that this is in no way similar to coming together, meeting everyone in a lecture theater and listening to the lecturer speak in front. This is going to be somewhat different in terms of its delivery, in terms of the way that things are presented, and as such, we need to be aware of that context and play to the strengths of that context. And also to be aware of the audience, because sometimes when it comes to the delivery of such content, sometimes it may be too fast for people, sometimes it may be a little bit too slow. And it depends on ultimately what type of audience you're going to be presenting this content to. If it's to semester 1 students, then you're obviously going to need to be a little bit more guided. You need to slow down a lot more. But if you are speaking to semester 4, semester 5 students, even clinical students, then you don't really need to come back to the content and go as slowly. A lot of the understanding and the knowledge that you believe that students will have is like a given. They would have already known this going into the lecture, and that's important to understand. So I put an ECG over here as like a picture for our pacing and tone, because it's just like the heart rate. Essentially, going too fast is dangerous, and going too slow is also dangerous. So it's ultimately about finding what's the right pace and tone for your various learning and teaching sessions. Ultimately, another thing that students need from the lecturers is to have the content at least a little bit more spread out. Sometimes lectures can be a little bit intense because everything's in 1 hour blocks, but the nature of the content is such that sometimes this content would, like the lecturer would need to rush through all this content at certain times, but sometimes the content is such that they can take their time with it, and sometimes they finish their lectures early. So ultimately, what students are looking for is a way for that pace to be a little bit more regular, a little bit less, I guess, less different in that sense. That's and even like if sessions are going to finish earlier, then maybe they can allocate less time for this. If sessions are going to take longer, lecturers are going to overrun, and they expect that the content is too much for that 1 hour, they can extend that 1 hour in that sense. And ultimately, just to make these like blocks, this 1 hour blocks, essentially a little bit more flexible, especially in this online context, and a little bit more organized in terms of timetabling. As you can see from my example of a timetable here, a lot of students, it's easy to understand why a lot of students are asking for things to be color-coded or even customized towards their various programs or groupings. In terms of the other side of things, so what lecturers would essentially need from students in order for teaching online teaching and learning to be effective is essentially to have a clear understanding of the platform that they are learning on, to be understanding of the context and the resources that are provided to them. Right now, I've shown like a few pictures, which is eLearn. We have our library portal. We have our new student portal, which has a lot of resources and forums that we can access, and even MBOS as one of the newly added forms of learning resources that we can utilize. And do know that this is like from my perspective as a medical student. Of course, we have so many more learning resources for the various programs. And it is important for students to essentially learn as much from these platforms as they can to better understand how to be able to utilize these platforms to their advantage. And also in terms of preparation time, it is important to give students a little bit of a heads up, a little bit of time to essentially prepare for the various sessions, because most of the time when students can go in for their sessions, they may be going into this new lecture, for example, for the very first time, and they may not necessarily be aware of what it is that they need to read up for beforehand. If there's anything that they need to prepare in order to be able to maximize what they can learn out of each and every one of these sessions. And it's essentially important for, and I understand that this is obviously going to be a lot more easy to do for students that are proactive, for the students that are self-directed. But of course, coming from the formal education system that they have in the past, and then suddenly coming into university, that transition is going to take time. And it's going to take a little bit of guidance to essentially shift them from, I guess, what is essentially spoon feeding to something that is more independent and proactive. In terms of, I guess, time management, critical thinking, and anticipation, we need students to be able to understand that they have all this time for them to be able to utilize. It's a lot more flexible now with this platform, and therefore we do expect them to be able to plan their time better, be able to essentially attend all the sessions, but also have enough time to read up and prepare for their sessions, do the beforehand preparation and do the afterhand revision. Critical thinking, essentially to be able to think more about the content and be able to ask a lot more questions, because ultimately through participation can we learn the most amount of things that we set out to learn in the various sessions. Ultimately, checks and balances. It is important to note that at every step of the way, sure, we are going to have exams and assessments at the very end of the semester, but or at the end of the module. But it's important to note that we need something that's going to be a little bit more regular, that's going to be able to check their learning at every step of the way, at every stage, so that at least we are following these students a lot more closely, and we are ensuring that their learning is on track, as opposed to maybe they're not learning effectively at the start and they're rushing at the end. Ultimately, it's important to make sure that this is regular. So to conclude, ultimately, when we look to the future, it is important to note that from my perspective, remote learning is very promising. We've already seen a lot of the benefits that it can bring, but we've also seen a lot of the challenges that lie ahead in terms of implementing this and using this to its fullest potential. So it is important to note them, to acknowledge them, and to essentially maximize the benefits but minimize drawbacks. And this will take time, but as long as both parties are able to come together and address these needs, both present and future, then they're able to at least embrace the future of teaching and learning as it comes, and they're able to do this together. So with that, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. I will hand over my time back to Mr. Hassan.
Thanks, Dave. Actually, your talk and your whatever you shared is complement to what Prof. Karim and Associate Prof. Dr. Nilesh shared. So, I mean, it's good to know learner, and you have rightly pictured, what they want. So now floor is open to the question, and there is a question by Prof. Villa. I think one of the things I struggle with is the illusion of learning during online sessions. I wonder if my session has been effective for students as I imagine it to be. So anyone would like to take an answer? I think I saw, if I look at the chat, the way the energy is going on there, if you save this chat and complete read, I think you could get a micro credential of remote learning short course. Yeah, Prof. Karim, would you like to say anything on this question?
Yeah, there is no foolproof way to ensure that students are really learn. we can put our best effort and so-called our best practices and apply whatever theory or principles that we feel would deliver the best learning experience for the students. But at the end of the day, I think there's no way we can guarantee that the students have learned. So I think first of all, I think we have to put the best effort and when we design our course, we plan and design our course. There are a lot of research, the so-called evidence-based strategies that we can use. We just have to learn and adopt and adapt some of those evidence-based approaches and strategies in designing our course, and then getting the feedback, constantly, regularly from the students, asking them whether, how they are doing, or whether, ask them to tell us or tell me. In my case, always I ask the student to tell me, whether areas that I need to improve. So to me, I mentioned in the chat, constant communication and getting constant feedback from the students, to me, is very, very critical. Otherwise, we tend to forget and we tend to kind of think that we are doing well without asking the students whether they are the receiving end, whether they are really learn or not. So that's my take for the time being.
Right. Great. I think I will go to Dave now. Dave, what is your opinion about having co-created lessons or even content? I will add on word this content,
May I clarify? So co-created lessons, essentially lessons that are created by both the lecturers and the students in that sense.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, there are a few ways to look at this. I mean, when we look at co-creating lessons, sometimes at the very beginning, maybe if you're looking at early on first-year students, sometimes they don't know what they want. They don't know what they don't know. So it becomes a little bit of a challenge in terms of what they would hope to get out of lessons, what they would hope to learn, and essentially how they can contribute towards the organization of those lessons. So for them, I guess it needs to be a little bit more guided. Co-created lessons may work as we sort of go towards like higher up semesters where students properly understand at least enough of the content to know what is important, what is not, and how it's important to deliver these lessons. Then maybe co-created lessons are definitely going to be a lot more beneficial. And I think that that is honestly the right way forward, because having co-created lessons allows students to have a lot more say in terms of how they can go about teaching and learning. It's, I guess, that complement towards providing feedback to essentially ensure that the lessons that they go for are best suited for their natures and their learning styles. So I would say that that is incredibly important, but ensure that but of course, it will take time, and I guess you can see it happening a lot more for future semesters.
Yes, Dr. English, you would like to add?
Yeah, I agree, because in IMU School of Dentistry, their students always produce wiki, and these wikis are mostly in the advanced semesters when they go for clinical experience, and based on the clinical experience, and many of these wikis which is done with um, University of Dundee and other partner schools has really been got acclaimed by scientific community. So I really agree with Devansh that we should go for this in higher semester, definitely.
Great. And just to add on a follow-up question, I would say, what about co-creating questions to be discussed in the class? Anyone would like to start?
Yeah, I tried this, but I tried in very early semester now. So I have actually a software for this, but it was not very effective in earlier semesters.
Right. Prof. Karim?
Yeah, I love this idea because I've been doing it. Co-creating lesson, co-creating questions. I've been doing it for some time already. Co-creating content as well. So when we talk about co-creating lessons, I think this is a great opportunity for us actually to spell out the learning outcome very clearly and keep coming to that constantly. And when we are let's say discussing one topic, so among other things that I will ask the students is to share useful point or tweets, to tweet useful points. So using the Twitter, using the hashtag for the course. And by doing that, imagine I have about 60 students in my class. I ask them only to tweet only one per week for that particular topic. So in effect, I will have 60 tweets, and that will form the content for that particular topic. At the same time, I also train them to create critical questions for each lesson or for each topic. And usually I use Excel for this, I use Google Sheet for this purpose so that everyone can see their questions and then they can vote for the questions. And in the next class, we will take one or two those top questions to discuss. So yes, this is a way to empower students. So it's all about empowerment, as Devans mentioned just now, empower the students and get them to participate, to be part of the course.
Yeah, just to add on, I think Socrative have this feature also, where you could ask an open-ended question and then you give back all the question and rate the. That's a great. Yeah. Okay. Any other question? If not,
I can answer that VR question from one of them.
Yeah, it's slightly.
I think that VR has not always been effective because every skills-based activities what we do in IMU is not perfectly adapt with the VR situation, because immersive situation require limited skills scenarios.
I purposely didn't ask because I felt it's not fall directly under remote learning. Okay, and I felt that anyway. But thanks for answering, Dr. Nilesh. Now, I think for sake of the time, could we just wrap up? I can give you like 1 minute each and you could just give your closing remarks. We start with Prof. Karim.
Well, we talk about best practices for online learning. To me, the keyword there is learning. So no, don't worry so much about the technology part, but I think we need to focus on learning and how to design the best learning experience for our student in the context of online. As simple as, learn certain technique. And as a final remark, I want to recommend this book, Thinking Through Quality Questioning. I've been studying this book in the last few semesters, but this semester I have a chance to apply every session, one or two techniques, and I find it very, very effective. A simple quality questioning technique can be very effective in an online environment to engage students. And I have shared a hashtag in the chat box, IMK221. I just want, for those on Twitter, just search that hashtag and see how my students are tweeting the content, creating the content together for the course.
Thanks, Prof. Karim. And go to Associate Prof. Dr. Nilesh.
Yeah,
final words.
My views will be more of administrator, because whatever myself and Mr. Hasnan has gone through since March, when suddenly 100% went to us. So I feel that getting feedback from the student very frequently about each and every aspect of synchronous and asynchronous learning will help us to meet up the challenge, particularly for us who has to deal with 6 or 7 schools together. So that is my take.
Okay. Dave, your final words or final wish?
Yeah, there is. So I guess my final remarks, I've sort of grouped them into the 3 C's, which is collaboration, coordination, and communication. So it's important to note that when it comes to collaboration, when it comes to online teaching and learning, this is a new platform and a new world that we are exploring, and we're exploring it together. So it's important to come together and essentially work on, I guess, teaching and learning from both sides together, both the lecturers and the students put together. But and also coming towards coordination, essentially it's important to have a good framework and a good structure going forward in terms of its implementation, so as to not essentially waste time. But important to also note that it does take time for such things to be implemented. So you're going to see it be rather crude at the beginning and rather refined towards the end. And this is something that we should recognize as well. And the last thing is communication. So just have a lot of back and forth, a lot of feedback, a lot of talking between the students and the lecturers. And I'm sure we'll be heading towards the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, this is the hard thing to cut everybody here. I wish I could continue this for hours, because the way the energy you people have and the chat, I really, impressed. Thanks for all participation, first of all, and thanks to our distinguished speakers. And we move on to our MC for next event. Nurul?
Thank you to the panelists and chairperson for a very interesting session. The next item in the agenda is breakout session in the form of mini workshops. Yesterday, we have had 2 mini workshops. So today, we are going to have 3 more interesting mini workshops. Welcome back to the main room, and I hope that you have all enjoyed the workshops. The next item in the agenda is a plenary talk entitled Online, Offline or Off Message, The Good, Bad and Ugly of Assessment with Technology by our honorable speaker, Professor Richard Fuller. This presentation will be facilitated by our dearest Professor Dr. Vishna Devi Nadaraja and Ms. Zabiba. Now, I would like to invite Prof. Vishna and Ms. Zabiba to begin the session.
Thank you very much, Nurul. So, good morning, everyone. And well, it's not good morning, I suppose. It's good morning for Richard. And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session. I look forward to this session very much for several reasons. And you will understand as I introduce the speaker, why I look forward to it. So Richard is the Vice Dean in the School of Medicine at the University of Liverpool. He's also a stroke physician, so he's an honorary consultant with the NHS. And currently he is actually doing many things because he's not only managing the school in the School of Medicine, but also actually providing service at NHS. So I would say that we are very lucky to have Richard in the sense that he sees medical education not only as an administrator, as an educator, but also as a clinician who's in practice and very much in touch with what's happening on the ground. So this is one advantage of having Richard speak to us today, because he can update us and help us learn when we're implementing things. We need to be realistic. And I think that's what I like really listening to Richard. He really gives us a realistic view. He's not a blind advocate of technology. He's an enthusiast of technology, but he actually brings us a realistic and yet with that realistic approach, there is much innovation that he can offer for us to think about, and he and his team in Liverpool and previously Leeds have brought about. So I hope you enjoy this talk, because I know each time I listen to Richard, I'll have that aha moment and I'll think that, hey, why didn't I think of that? And it is really truly a learning experience. So thanks very much, Richard. I know it's really early in the morning. So for those who know, it's actually 8 hours behind us. So it's about 4 a.m. for him, right? So, but he has kindly done this, and that's the third thing about Richard that you need to know. He's passionate, and he knows if people want to learn, he's there to help us learn and facilitate that learning. So we will start with the recorded version. So we did a recording, and after that we will have Q&As. So please put your questions either on the Q&A platform of the Zoom, or you can do it in the chat line. What Zabiba and I will do is we will also monitor the chat line, and we'll bring your questions to the Q&A session, and Prof. Richard will be there to take the questions live. So thank you very much, and looking forward to hearing Richard. Yeah.
I'm from the University of Liverpool in the United Kingdom. I'm a stroke physician and geriatrician and professor of medical education. And it's a real treat and an honour to join you at the IMU Festival of Learning. As ever, life means that we're doing a lot of our things remotely and digitally, so it's sad not to have that human connection. I thought I'd appear very briefly via video just to introduce the talk, then vanish off for the main, and then hopefully, if everything works, be available for some face-to-face questions after. So Vishnu and colleagues at IMU very generously gave me an open title, which I've changed quite a bit to something I hope will be provocative in terms of thinking at the end of a busy day. And I love the idea of a festival of learning, something that's about a celebration and a reflection of great practice. And I think a lot of it reflects on the great work that you guys are doing at IMU. And for me, the value in many of us of working with you really challenges me to think and learn myself. So without further ado, let's talk about what the talk is for. Well, I'm going to try, if I can make my slides move, to look at the interface between technology and other factors. One of the real challenges for us is that we tend to look at things in a very binary or siloed fashion. We'll talk about technology, or we'll talk about assessment or general education. For me, technology and assessment is a real interface discipline. Getting the best of what pedagogy tells us, both about educational assessment and tech, about creativity and innovation, and also the heart of what we do, really high quality clinical care for our patients and for our current and future professionals. So I'm going to take us through some challenge, some hopefully useful good practice, and then start to future gaze a little bit as we move forwards. And I will hopefully see you in 30 minutes or so. Thanks ever so much. So you started the Festival of Learning by looking forwards to 2030. I'm going to drag us back to the here and now, to 2020. It's obviously been a year like no other. And in some ways, the interesting predictions that people made at the start of 2020 from a technology perspective have really come to the fore, partly because of our response to COVID. Although I'm not sure that they could have accurately predicted the global societal change that has been seismic for us all. And particularly within education, where all segments of the sector, from preschool through to continuing professional development, have been challenged and disrupted, and are likely to continue to do so for some time. And how have we dealt with this? Well, in the early phases, I think all of us hoped for this, that we could hide under the duvet or stick our heads in the sand, hope this passed us by, and return to business as usual. That's clearly not been the case, and we've dealt with this in a number of ways. First and foremost by what I'm calling the Homer Simpson screaming panic approach, where all of us have faced the crisis of I've got an exam looming or another deadline looming, and the structures and processes I used to be able to run this in have all stopped. So what have we done? We spent a long time getting comfortable with what I would call the Zoomathon, hour after hour of our lives planning, only to find that those plans are changed, sometimes just hours later as the situation evolves. I don't think that planning has been wasted, of which more in a second. Certainly for me, the countless, what feels like years of my life spent on online conversations have given me some really interesting perspectives of colleagues' interior decoration and also what we might politely call in the UK loungewear. But that aside, I think all that planning, all that crisis has led to this: a huge amount of innovation, creativity, ideas, and inspiration. And what's sat behind that? Well, arguably technology. But I'd like us to look at that in a much more critical way, to look at technology from the interface of assessment, and particularly education, scholarship and pedagogy, from clinical practice, as well as the creativity and the innovation that technology can afford us. And as I move through some of these examples, many of which I hope will seem familiar to you, you can work out whether technology has had a benefit here, or in fact, a bit like Clint Eastwood, it's been more on the bad and the ugly side in relation to our usage. So let's start out. One of the critical features of assessment is to think carefully about the consequences. What are we seeking to do and what do we anticipate will happen? The intended consequences are hopefully easier to derive, but we need to think carefully about what we might call the unintended consequences, and never more so of this very value-laden simple phrase, let's just do it online. Because whilst we have been relatively successful at doing that over the last few months, what's really interesting when I have looked at the literature and listened to colleagues and chatted in meetings is that two big issues for me have not been highlighted. And firstly, this issue of transmediation. This is not a new thing. It's highlighted by colleagues in the Ottawa Consensus on Technology Enhanced Assessment 10 years ago. But the risk of simply just popping it online, changing the medium of delivery without changing the rules and the processes that surround it. And a huge amount of simple, but I think quite critical questions have been ignored. How long does it take to answer, for example, a single best answer online? How much time should I give per question? What are the issues about cognitive fatigue for students as they sit through hour after hour of testing? What are the challenges for staff? Again, we've had to upskill ourselves fairly rapidly here. And what are the risks of automation? It brings a number of benefits, but if we're not careful, as my colleague Eva Purlia from Finland highlights, at the press of a button, I can share an error or bad practice with many. So lots of chance of mistakes in delivery and analysis. And until we really think and grapple with those, many of us may have done, but we've not really spoken about what those challenges have been and how we've overcome them. They remain neglected. The other big elephant in the room, and critically the most important one for me, is this: the assumption that by testing online there is digital equity. Some of it born of the very good work around bring your own device, which has really leveraged a significant advantage, particularly in workplace assessment in health professions. But we've got to remember that not all devices are equal. Not all broadband is stable. If we look at our own experiences, we probably find, well, this is certainly true in my own case, that my daughter Sophie has got more devices than me. They are as good, if not better than I am. And she's the person who's demanding information about when her next upgrade is, partly because she seems to drop her phone more often than I do, but that's a different story. You look at your new learner cohorts, they will often have better and more up-to-date devices than we do as a faculty. But when you look deeply within that cohort, you see an awful lot of variability. Some students with the very best, some students who are managing on loaned, somewhat ancient devices. And the devices are not just the only thing, that some people's education and schooling have actually given them an advantage. They have been socialized into learning with the device. We know that a lot of the work from Prensky in relation to digital natives has largely been debunked. We may know how to learn and play. We may know, how to play with a device. We don't necessarily know how to learn in an educational sense from technology. Some students have not had that advantage and may therefore struggle when it comes to a test. We know that reliable broadband is a challenge, but how about a quiet environment in which to work, study, or take a test? Think about all of the endless Zooms and Teams and Skype meetings you've been in, whether your connection's frozen or you've watched somebody's children walk into the room, cute cats and dogs, random elderly relatives, the Amazon delivery guy, the doorbell. All of those distractions are substantial. Now imagine trying to do that within a test-taking format. Certainly a real lesson for ourselves here in Liverpool was the months of planning that this needed to adopt a truly equitable online approach. We found that a number of students really did not have the study space that was quiet and private enough and safe enough to be able to take a test. So if we're not careful, one of the major unintended consequences is this, that the already established, and I would say depressing, attainment gap that exists in terms of socioeconomic status and digital equity is widened when we use more of it to test. So I think a real mission for all of us to make sure that doesn't happen. An approach that seems probably familiar to you all, which I'm going to call technology heavy but theory light. So let's look at the new discourse, online testing, the online or virtual OSCE. I'm going to come to open books in a moment and later, but what do they really mean? Apart from depressing me because I'm not sure we know, and the fact that we've gone back to using tools rather than systems. How fair is it, how reasonable it is to candidates and faculty that we introduce new tests online without too much evaluation, piloting, or thinking about how we do this well? Perhaps that was okay in the very, very early stages of spring as COVID hit us, where many of us had to make very rapid decisions about licensing and graduation exams. But unfortunately, a sense that that culture has propagated into, well, we did it then, we'll do it again. And what's the impact on candidates? Well, some really fascinating output in the Medical Teacher Journal, where they have a student views section and quite a few really interesting views about the terror, is the word I would use, the unfairness, the challenge of taking and preparing for an exam you have almost no time for, but is thrust upon you tomorrow. And how fair is it to do that now, where we can plan a little bit more effectively? What about the online, the virtual OSCE? Well, I've become slightly jaundiced in terms of seeing and watching and hearing about this. Not because it doesn't exist, because there's some really great work from colleagues, for example, in University College London, from GCAN US, Kathy Bersico down in Singapore, really leveraging our thinking about how we do this well. But many of the things that I see just seem to neglect any attempt to fulfill a meaningful, high-quality performance assessment. The 2 or the 3 station OSCE, which isn't an OSCE at all. It's a Viva or some form of structured oral exam, or even a knowledge test online called a station. It's almost like we've regressed back 30 years in good practice. And the worry for me is that this is now being talked about as acceptable. And as an employer, as a patient, how confident would I be if my new doctor had been through that process? As a student, we can see this being an expectation. Well, last year got away with the 2 station OSCE, why can't we? Really difficult question to answer and deal with if we're not careful. How about open book testing? Well, open book testing, again, a really fascinating area that we have arguably mishandled, because I'm not sure most of us are really quite clear about what a truly open book test is. We have assumed that online equals open book, and that's had a really challenging impact for learners who are saying, well, this is an open book test, or X has used an open book test. Why can't we do that? Well, in fact, when you look at what X has done, X has used an online exam using closed book format questions, knowledge application with SBAs, against the clock in quite a proctored system. They have not approached open book testing in the way that it's perhaps set out to do, which is to look at quite complex problems and bring in lots of material from colleagues, from the internet, from books and other resources, and submitting their responses later. And I think we have perhaps done ourselves a major disservice in terms of not quite understanding what these things are. Again, focus too much on the technology and way less on the theory and the pedagogy. More of the same. How about our adoption of technology, which ultimately feels more like profiling and punishing? Well, this is about how we misuse assessment data that's been designed for other purposes. And it's attractive using technology to say, well, I've got a lot of data about how a student's performed, and I could perhaps use that to try and predict the future. But doing that in what I would call a retrofit way, when I take material that has been used for formative or assessment for learning type approaches, and then use this for high stakes decision making, I think that's really indefensible. It's indefensible in 2 ways. Number 1, in terms of the appeal system, but number 2, what message about trust and confidence are we placing in our assessment systems for our learners? I think we're causing a real problem. How about the rapid adoption of artificial intelligence? Or in fact, as my colleagues Vishnu Nadaraja and Victoria Jones, who it's been great fun to record some of this work on, have really reflected artificial unintelligence, a brilliant work by Meredith Broussard that really debunks some of our assumptions about this shiny new technology that will solve everything. Well, we've seen this critically, or I should say uncritically adopted within health professions discourse without a lot of thinking about what some of these analytic impacts can really be. And one of the challenges, and I think we've seen some of this with assessment, is that garbage in equals garbage out. So bad data or inaccurate, incorrect, a limited data set that's put into an algorithm that's designed by somebody who doesn't necessarily understand the breadth of how we make decisions in relation to assessment, that excludes the human, well, what's the output? Well, in its narrowest sense, as you can see here, harm to those institutions practicing like that. But I would also say a wider harm to the very good practice and a huge amount of tireless endeavour and scholarship that some organisations that have really adopted programmatic approaches to using data sensitively and sensibly have used. And in their case, they've been using data in a way that for me is about gathering and guiding, using information to help support the next steps, rather than the retrofit that profile and punishes. The ugly for me, though, is this. And I ask critically, and I ask honestly, whether we have lost our way with an assessment in the last few months, because as we've embraced technology, the whole language has changed. Technology is about cheating. If I run a test online or I give somebody a device, they'll be looking up the answers, they'll be phoning a friend, they will be passing information. The world will fall over because we are testing online. And that feels perhaps overstatement, but I look at a lot of the information I've heard recently, a lot of the messages I've seen and the commentary, and it feels like this. And what's been our response? About proctoring and lockdown. For those of you who may have watched Trudy Roberts' webinar on the Amy COVID series, she talks about a depressing and rather dystopian future using drones for invigilation. What does that say? Well, the discourse is all about mistrust. And it's not just medical education that's the problem. Here we are. Here's chess, and I love this article from the UK Guardian, as it talks about paranoia and cheating, the new culture, the new normal. So can we reboot that? Well, we can do it by looking at what the evidence says, because in fact the evidence that's emerging is that this is no bigger or smaller a problem than it was before we used online as a way of delivering and testing. And I think before we dive down a path that feels like the Minority Report of assessment, I think we need to rebuild some of that culture of trust in assessment before we dive forwards. So good, bad, ugly, you decide. For a bit more Clint Eastwood, I think unfortunately the very uncritical way we have adopted technology, and I use critical a lot in this presentation, forgive me, but I mean it, because as a learner, it feels much more like the Dirty Harry series. Do I feel lucky? Do I know whether I'm walking into an assessment that seems high quality and thoughtful, or something completely different? So where do we go from here? Well, one of the challenges about using technology is it comes with its own set of rules and regulations, as well as a conflicting set of rules and regulations in our institutions about what we can and can't do. And then on the other side of this, we have what we call the pundit, the armchair expert, cozy fireside chat that says it will all be okay. You just need to do this. Your assessment will be perfect. Hopefully, I'm not like that. I spend more of my time less in an armchair and more in on the front line. I think the scars on my back probably suggest that I've learned to move away from that. But how do we make sense of these conflicting approaches, particularly when the armchair expert can be quite influential to others in positions of power and decision making? Oh, it's very easy. I went to it. I saw this talk, and you can just put it online. Come back to me with a solution next week. Well, what part of education can't you spell or understand? I think that's really, really quite hard when we're faced with those kind of challenges. So how do we break through? How do we deal with this? Well, I think by returning to scholarship. And as I've aged, I found that looking at the work of others, old and new, really, really helps inform where I go and where I think, because there is some great practice out there in terms of how we have really reimagined the OSCE, but also the collegiality around the sharing of resources, many of which are very, very theory informed. So a good example here, Brownie Anderson's section in Medical Education Journal. And to what extent should we be engaging better with colleagues from other non-health professions education settings? I think we really failed to learn from people who have done this arguably better and for longer than we have. And two great resources in relation to online testing and approaches to thinking about assessment malpractice. How are others in other professions unconnected to education shaping our thinking? Well, I would certainly recommend the blog series that sits here. This is the Royal Society for the Encouragement of the Arts. And again, some of the work here has really shaped my thinking about how we might move forwards with many of these challenges we have around education and technology. So practical things, 5 things. I use 5 because it's my favorite number, and clearly I can't think about anything else with a bigger figure than 5. So off we go. And the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to put down the technology, because the faults in assessment that existed pre-COVID, they existed pre-tech. And if we simply just adopt tech in the way that some of us have started to do, I think we amplify the risk of error and challenge and difficulty. So let's do a life laundry. Let's look at a fresh look about what we do in our assessment practice and think whether it meets our purposes. How clear are we about what that assessment is set out to do? Have we got the right tools, the right deployment? Does it meet our needs now? Is it time for a retirement party for things that we used to think were best practice? And can we use things like the Ottawa Consensus Guidance on Good Testing and Quality Assessment from John Norsini and colleagues as a way to guide that? And in doing so, we really embrace the predominant mood music, which is about assessment systems and not tools. And those systems are important because they help us rethink assessment. I'm going to talk about this in one of the slides later, but it is about learner development and safe patient care. And so feedback is an essential part of what we do. We really need to make sure our technology, let alone our assessment systems, can make sure we can leverage some change here. And in doing so, we take advantage of the things that are already there. We go back to the journals, the conferences, the collegiate practice we all have. And I'm going to share some articles which for me have been particularly influential recently about understanding the notions of how learners trust us and how teachers trust us and our students and each other when we're making decisions about using big data within programmatic assessment systems. Many of us use portfolios. Many of those portfolios are arguably less than ideal, the bureaucratic hurdles that Eric Dreesen has previously described. But some great work that shows us that we again need to help learners learn how to learn using technology. They need guidance and advice about how to get the very best out of portfolio-based approaches. We learn from the past. We learn about why OSCEs work and why they don't. And this is a really fascinating paper from colleagues at Queen's University in Belfast. I'd really recommend this, as well as bringing in new technology to understand a different way that we might test. This focus on the OSCE, but I think there are some really interesting lessons going forwards. And it's remembering a huge amount of technology has actually been nested in some of the consensus guidance that is coming out. The first new one to come out from Kathy Burske and colleagues looking at performance, then followed by technology and programmatic assessment, all of which really think about that interface of education and technology. How about number 2? Well, okay, I'm going to pick up the technology, but I'm not going to ask what I'm using. I'm going to ask why. Am I looking to replace what I do, avoiding the transmediation issue by improving efficiency in processes around existing assessments? Am I augmenting? Am I perhaps trying to reach out into workplace assessment or start to pilot and introduce new formats? Am I really leveraging the advantage of technology and its connectivity? Not just within individual institutions where that learner-faculty institutional linkage I think is really powerful, but across institutions. I think an area we haven't explored particularly much is how do we use technology to really bring patients much more into the heart of our education structures and practices. How about the 2 T's? Where do I want technology to target? Are there particular issues within my program where this could work well? Or do I think a more strategic approach at program level will really help leverage change? And do I truly want to transform what I do? Because I do. If we do, I think we need to think differently about technology. I think we need to think about technology as something more than the shiny tools we use for teaching and learning or delivery of assessments and education. I think we need to reflect and align with what we do in everyday practice. So I think about yesterday, extended afternoon and evening ward round with some consultations with families. What was going on the ward? Well, many of us were using server and cloud-based computing to bring together quite broad sets of data, connecting in with colleagues in other hospitals to discuss patient care. I was able to look at patients' lab results, radiology, old letters, and a hugely rich set of data before I went to see them or at the bedside. Many of us were using technology for procedures. My patients were using technology. They were using WhatsApp and FaceTime to chat to relatives or communicate with relatives in the ways that mattered to them. So a very different way of delivering in healthcare. We need to ensure assessments align. They align using that device-augmented care, video consultations, ultrasound at the bedside. They take advantage and they respect and embrace how our patients use their own digital literacy and devices themselves, arguably sometimes better than we do. How we use emergent data and analytics to actually manage and mitigate risk going forwards. How do we make decisions about care using complex data? And the positive and negative challenges of that approach, as we've highlighted. Do we aim for a better assessment future? I think we should do. We shouldn't just accept the status quo, but online. And the 3 Ps for me about programs and programmatic, you've heard much more about that, but the leverage that we bring through technology is being able to personalize. And I think that brings some really fascinating insights, perhaps some redefining moments where assessment is not just about passing and failing in a hurdle. It's about assessing engagement and understanding what the learner's up to. It's about using it as a diagnosis and very rich data that we can then use to support improvement, because that's what feedback should be about. It's about targeted, more focused and customized interventions, depending on learner need, and a focus that is about improving what we all do. Within a system that is more just than a collection of tools, but one that commits itself to learner development, because as we get better and more skilled, guess what? Arguably, we're delivering better, safer patient care. And technology is a huge lever there. The immersive, engaging, opportunistic way that technology really attracts us. It's probably something many of you are using now, phones out, iPads out, doing something much more productive than listening to me. Angry Birds or Clash of the Clans. You may be connecting the latest shopping with Amazon, or in fact, messaging friends or tweeting about how bad this is. But joking aside, I think we can really demand much more of technology for a better assessment future. That said, still no tools at the moment. I'm not talking about the what. We need to ensure that we are ready. And many thanks to Vishna. I've shamelessly adopted the slide that we used at some of our Ottawa consensus work, because I think it is a brilliant reminder of what we need to underpin in terms of the architecture. About people and people skills. We often forget about those in technology and what we value. About processes and the impact potentially of technology failure on assessment. How often do we see that talked about and reported? We don't, but probably all of us have got experience, certainly some interesting, relatively live experience for me over late summer in this. How about our products? Well, we're often in a commissioner-provider type model. Somebody will come and sell us something or show us something. Maybe we should be thinking differently about partnering not just across academic institutions, but with industry, and particularly small and medium-sized enterprises more. Where we can leverage a benefit from both. And how about scholarship? And this really was reaffirmed by a brilliant editorial in Advances in Health Sciences Education over summer that talked importantly about the need to underpin a lot of this innovation reporting that we're seeing at the moment with technology-related scholarship. How do we know where it's working? What is authentic about this? Has learning taken place? Is assessment what David Bowd would call sustainable? Is a different assessment experience coupled with more actionable feedback, better faculty support because I can reach out using technology? Does this change behaviours for the good for the future? We need to answer some of these questions to maximise dissemination. And in doing so, we need to think strategically, because a really interesting a chapter in a book I was reading by by a guy called Paul Marhag really challenged me to think about technology, because often we don't get beyond the pilot stages. How do we do this better? How do we do it strategically? So we need to take a design-focused approach and bring our learners and stakeholders into this. Oops, sorry. Start that one again. We need to think about our solutions that sit across the undergraduate, postgraduate divide, certainly at least within a program, rather than in the cardiology internship or module, I use a smartphone. In women's health, I'm back to paper and pencil. We need to overcome some of that. We need to think about feedback, as we've highlighted. And importantly, as we've just talked about, the systems and structures and a way of evaluating this much more thoughtfully and disseminating it better. And these are very many of the highlights that come out of the 2020 Ottawa Consensus statements that are being written at the moment. So where do I go next from this? What things do I choose to take forward? Perhaps what we've talked about is technology for the now in assessment, but what does the future bring? Well, I think there's an opportunity to rethink about learning and assessment in a different way, and to think about whether there are missing bits of our armory of tools that we need to really engage with. So the top of the taxonomy, Miller, perhaps if you will, I quite like learning taxonomies like Mazzano and Kendrick, which are much richer, more detailed, because they make us think about whether OSCE and workplace assessment are enough by themselves. And for me, this is where the open book really comes in. Reflecting back on that experience of yesterday, quite complex decision-making about everyday problems on my ward round, where I needed to bring in the expertise of many colleagues, discussing a second consultant opinion I'd undertaken with a colleague elsewhere, and bringing in therapists and senior nurses to help decision make. All of us are faced with difficult problems, and we rely on teams and evidence and access to that evidence at our fingertips to be able to do so, whether that's in health or academic practice or whatever. So these ideas of takeaway exams or open book tests have been used in general education for much longer, and happy to share the reference if you get in touch. But at work in science, technology, engineering and maths disciplines, have really started to pioneer some different thinking about how we can use takeaways. And interestingly for Bengtson, in this summary, he talks critically about medicine and health professions too. Before we dive into the, we'll open book test tomorrow, learn from those people who've really thought about the architecture. And I'm very pleased to cite this work from colleagues in IMU, because it was a brilliant paper on MedEd published that really thought about the resources and the infrastructure and the architecture and the needs of learner and faculty before we do this. But I think going forwards, we need to invest more in this approach, and we challenge what the open book is. Is it a single person? Is it what we can access? Or is it our team? Is it a good old-fashioned paper resource, or what's at our fingertip in terms of the smartphone and our friends? And I think there's some really exciting opportunities to reinvigorate assessment. How do we take such matters beyond pilot phases, though? This is about the culture that we work in and the need to adopt a mindset of culture that's much more innovation focused. And I hope I'm not preaching to the converted too much, because I think there's much great practice that you guys are already celebrating that many of us could learn from in terms of how you do it. It's about this idea of change advocacy and how we reward it, how we value it, how do we seek it out? And importantly, and I think for me, something you might reflect on that you do really well is how do you seek out partnerships to do this effectively? How do we employ people and empower them to contribute to this? So everybody matters, not senior figures, not the boss, not senior professor. Arguably, because as we get older, I think we become less useful for this. But we need to have as part of this a culture where we all value working and learning alongside each other. And to really take advantage of technology, we need to get much better, much more agile about the strategic decisions about failing or scaling, not endless pilots for the sake of it. If it's not working, back to the drawing board or scrap it. If it's working, think carefully about how I can scale this up and use it elsewhere. that requires us to think very differently about our approval systems in universities and academic and health institutions. They can seem very, very slow, laborious. And what's been interesting for me for COVID is some of those shackles have been broken a little bit. But we need to think about our culture as well as the technology. And we need to plan. We need to plan ahead. So what were people saying at the start of 2020 for technology, and what might that relate to for assessment? Well, we all know that we are at the start of the fourth industrial revolution, and this interface between devices, technology, the interweb of things, and ourselves as humans. And I think the last few months have really reshaped some of our thinking about what we can and can't do. So what does that mean for assessment? Where should we be exploring? So for me, horizon scanning is really important. It is part of that change and innovation mindset. What else is going on? What does that mean for what we do in our practice? So how about tools? So the assessment holodeck. We're already using virtual reality and augmented reality much more for immersive testing. How about eye movement tracking and visual perception, wearables, textiles, and I could keep going forever, although it feels a little bit more like a shopping list and less than theory-informed practice. How could technology enhance processes help us? Well, blockchain is one of these things that's been floated around for some time, but this idea of ledger technology to create fully automated systems can feel attractive in terms of how we process quite complex assessment data. That said, I wouldn't replace the human, because unfortunately, unfortunately, not sure, tech people are changing. Fewer humans and more about virtual assistants, the drones, systems that will almost decide whether to hire or fire us, to direct our training, to suggest things to us that are going to be useful. I think there are some really useful, thoughtful approaches within that technology we need to embrace. But critically for me, the thing we really need to plan for is this. It's maintaining where humans have value. And again, a nice article from last year, this in relation to artificial intelligence and teaching at universities. As Mark Hall says here, we've got to make it clear why humans matter. So for me, a really influential thinker is Gert Leonhard, who particularly a technology-based futurist, and he talks a lot about, should I say, human-only traits. So he talks about what are the things that we can't automate that have real value. So what does that mean for assessment? Well, compassion, a very human-focused trait. How do we measure it? Really quite hard. Can we measure it at all? Is it a bit like professionalism, where we might want to spend time thinking about how we can look at indirect proxies for it and think about capturing it longitudinally? Creativity is an important part of being a health professional. How do we value it? How do we test it? How can we think differently about how we make decisions? And this idea of abdication. So when do I decide to leave the decision to the machine in relation to a diagnosis or the assessment of somebody's risk? Or where do I effectively protocol violate because I don't necessarily think the needs of my patient, which are very, very complex, fit this algorithm or this approach? And critically for me, ethical thinking, still very much a human-only trait, are very, very important in some of the decisions that we make, and particularly about how and where we work with technology in assessment and patient care. And I think very much that's where the investment is. So I'm going to pause because I am coming to the end, you'll be pleased to know. The bad news is that I will hopefully reappear again for some questions in a second. But this is what colleagues and myself have called our Tina moment. There is no alternative. This is a real opportunity to leverage change, some of which is directly impacted on by technology, some of which I think much more indirect. We've got to go back to basics and invest in getting them right. Bad assessment plus technology just compounds problems. We've got to make sure our assessment culture is right. It is about development of learners and safe patient care, not just about testing and hurdles and tick boxes. Because if we get that right, we need to really align the technology we use in practice with the technology we use in education and with assessment. We've got to be clear about whether it's working or not, and to be able to share that with colleagues. And therefore, dissemination and scholarship are really, really important parts of this technology journey that we're going on in relation to assessment and education. But importantly, we need not to forget this, that at the centre of what we do in education and health are humans. Humans cannot be muscled and shoved out of the way here. We've got to really invest time in care and compassion and communication and collegiality. All of these C's really, really matter. Equally important in an era where potentially things are going to be automated to an extent and we lose some of that face-to-face contact. Think about what we're learning at the moment from a socially distanced, isolated life and working practices. Many people are starting to comment now on how they miss the social and the human. We've got to make sure as we progress with assessment that we don't lose that. So I'm going to finish with the words of somebody much wiser than me from 150 years ago, who actually said change is challenging, it is difficult, but not to change, not just to embrace technology, but to take this opportunity to redirect the journey of technology is going to be fatal. Thank you very much for your attention. Hopefully I'll appear online for some questions now, but do please get in touch for references, ideas, thoughts, a chat. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you very much, Richard. And that was really, as I said and predicted, really a thought-provoking talk and much to think about. Yeah. So as you can see from the chat line, we have actually quite a few questions, and I've sort of grouped up the questions, Richard. And we'll start first with faculty. So I see some questions regarding faculty. And you have alluded to it in your talk also. In fact, the last part of your talk, I suppose, you know, the thing about changing also involves faculty. So the question is actually about guiding faculty and managing their expectations. Is there any shortcut to that? Like, for example, I think the question was more specific to open book, but is there any shortcuts because of time? You know, can we do it better? Yeah.
I'm hoping the sound comes through okay. I'll see if you're nodding. Yep.
Yes.
The depressing answer in some ways, Vishnu, is no. I think one of the interesting things with technology is that we're always, you know, the new upgrade will solve this. I'll buy this device. We're very socialized into this at our fingertips instant solution. And Steve Jobs and other people have been really, really successful about sort of engaging us with that sell, if you will. I think in terms of developing people, these skills take time, they take investment. But I think it is about people skills. I think people are always looking for shortcuts. And I saw that question. It made me really reflect on what's the answer. And that's why I highlighted the paper that you guys pulled out in Medical Teacher and Mellon published, because it's about getting that architecture right. I think just the latest shiny tool, the new assessment fad, the new device probably won't help us do this well. We need to invest in time and people. I think there is an opportunity through technology to connect with other people who are already doing this and exploring it well. And I think that's possibly the shortcut.
Sorry, Prof, to interrupt. Could you please pull your mic down on your, now we could hear better.
Yeah.
Okay, I now look like some kind of,
louder.
Live from the flight deck at 30,000 feet or at 4:30 in the morning. I'm still awake, sorry. So what I was saying there very briefly was that there's no shortcut for faculty development. We're always looking for the quick sell for technology. We need to think much more about investment in people skills, but where I think technology can help us is actually by sharing and partnering with other people who are already doing this. Yeah. So open book testing for me has been interesting because many people in general education have been doing takeaway tests for a long time. A criticism of medical education is we sit in our bubble. It's only us that are doing this. We're special. Actually, we're not. People in physics, in English, in music are all doing these kind of tests. Why don't we reach out to them and ask them how they do it? And I think for faculty development, actually looking at other education cultures can be really, really powerful in terms of changing some of our ideas and skill sets.
Yeah, I think that's really, I mean, you have summarized it pretty well. And one of the things I was thinking about is also it's a time for us to learn from our mistakes. So because it was quite a quick turnaround, right? So one of the ways is that what we did, I think you said it in the beginning we had to do certain things, but now that we have had time, what went well, we need to evaluate, and what mistakes we did, we need to correct it. I think that's good role modeling even for our students, right?
Well, I think it is, and I think it's the old it's the misquote, which is those who ignore history are condemned to repeat it.
Yep.
And I tried to be polite in the presentation, but I'm really worried about some acceptance of bad practice in performance assessment. You know, the 1 or 2 station Oscar, and people actually celebrating and being really proud because they are delivering this, and they think it's okay. It's almost like we'll go back to sweeping away 20, 30 years of scholarship. We're going to ignore what we have learnt to date before COVID. And because we've been able to do it differently, this is the new normal. And I think if we're not careful, we could do our learners a disadvantage. And I think, as I've tried to communicate, in doing so, we do our patients a significant disadvantage. So I think this is now the time to take stock. I'm not sure about Malaysia, but in the UK, I think we're hunkered down for spring, for example, for more of this and more of the same. And it feels like a continued roller coaster of decision making, but we've got to be able to take stock. And one of the things, it's in the TINA paper that I would really recommend, some work by the Royal Society of the Engagement of the Arts, and they look at this idea of crisis response theory. So again, as you were saying, Vishnu, how do you stop? How do you pause? How do you make sense of what you've learned over the last few months? Otherwise, it just feels like we're kind of running like the hamster on the wheel, and we're not stopping to learn.
Sure. And I think this brings in very well to the next question that comes in, is actually about that virtual assessments. And obviously the focus is more on the clinical competencies and clinical practice. So I think this is a question that has been coming up in many webinars, and obviously in our group here also, that how do you do that? I thought from that question, there was an assumption that we were doing it pretty well even before COVID, right? But so could you comment on that? Because there's the focus is on virtual or online clinical assessments, but what's your view?
I guess too, when I shook my head about us not doing it well, I would apply that to almost everybody. And I think a number of much wiser people than me recently have highlighted the fact that the problems that were there before COVID were there before COVID. And we've sort of forgotten those, that none of us did a perfect assessment. There's arguably no such thing. None of us had particularly effective assessment structures and systems. It's why programs of assessment, programmatic assessment, have been really influential for many people. Just punting it online, well, I think as you've seen and experienced, we've got the opportunity to really augment and enhance the mistakes that we make. So if we are going to test online, let's think differently about how that relates to authentic testing. So I think virtual consultations are a thing that more and more of us are doing, and we were doing that before COVID, and we can think about how the sort of virtual environment helps support that. So some work by Christoph Dwightler, who's part of the Ottawa Consensus Group on Technology Enhanced Assessment, was that idea of testing of virtual consultations. So effectively, resident picks up the phone or picks up the iPad and has a consult with somebody he may have never met before, and that is a reality for some health cultures. Physical examination, well, it's really difficult, nigh on impossible to set up your technology well enough to be able to test how I physically examine the abdomen or listen to somebody's heart, if I need to do that at all, online. Some really interesting work by P.T. Yates and colleagues in Kiel has shown that where the camera isn't right, and their work actually suggested you need 3 or 4 different cameras in a room to get a really good view of procedural and physical examination skills. We tend to make an awful lot of assumptions. We make shortcuts and we sort of think, well, I think you did that right. It looks okay. I think that might be fine. Whereas in face-to-face practice, we'd be able to change our own viewing position. We'd gain much richer information. We'd be focusing much more on faces and emotions to make those decisions. So I think we've got to be careful about that translation. I think where virtual can work, using video particularly, is workplace assessment. So if we're happy with something that is entirely feedback based, and I am, being able to sign in the learner from the bedside and actually watch their consultation, watch them on a ward round, see bits of their practice and provide very, very rich feedback, I think is really useful. Because there are often bits of practice we don't see, we don't watch, we don't record. We often do a single case focus. But the fascinating thing for me, and it really struck me when I was at IMU in November, was actually tagging on the back of the ward round. And I never get that luxury. It's always me running the ward round. It's really nice to be able to sit at the back of it and just watch and give feedback. And I think this is where technology can be really, really useful. So I think we can capture a different bit of practice. I think that's what virtual can really bring us.
There's one question from Dr. Werner, but I'll keep it to the end because I think it's a bit of a future gazing question.
Oh, wow. Good.
Yeah. But one question comes from Siva, and it also leads to a question that I wanted to ask. Is, have we forgotten certain things or not when we are talking about assessments and the change? And when you talked about feedback, I was thinking, you know, this is something that everybody was so focused on getting the test done. They've forgotten that feedback component. And Siva's question is actually also something like this about how an assessment method could cater to learners' needs, because they want feedback, but at the same time satisfy the criteria. So two parts about feedback and satisfying learners' needs, and also have we forgotten anything with assessment in this transition? Yeah.
I think I'll go backwards. I use the life laundry approach quite a bit because, and this predated COVID. It comes back to that question about why and what we're seeking to do. What is the purpose of the assessment? And a long culture in health professions education has been focused quite rightly on competency, but quite wrongly on neglecting feedback. The OSCE, I'm so busy doing this, I can't provide any feedback at all. And it's almost, why are you bothering doing the assessment at all? I mean, that feels quite challenging, you know, and I can't claim perfection. I grew up in the state at a time where OSCEs were being developed, and we focused much more on testing and competency and standards and less on feedback. So feedback's got to be part of our culture. It's got to be part of our institutional need in terms of how we're thinking about learner development. So we've got to bring that in. And I think once we bring that in and we align it with meaningful, authentic assessment. So are we testing what really goes on in practice, or are we still constructing this fallacy of standardized soap opera type plots that don't really look like everyday cases? We've got to move away from that and test what's real, what's sensible, and give feedback. So I think the two can sit alongside each other. Again, the work from PT Yates and colleagues. I've been working with them for a little while, and one of the really nice things was, as they were videoing assessment to understand how assessors make decisions, how we maintain standards. One of the most powerful things from that video was feedback. And there was a real dialogue and a debate between us in the research team about, well, if we video a performance and then we release it, everybody was initially very, very focused on it will be used for an appeal, or somebody will object to this. When it was released to the students, guess what? That wasn't what they were focused on. This was, wow, this is great. I can see myself. Oh my God, do I really look like that when other people are watching me? You know, and we talk a lot about performance assessment, but actually the performance, I guess from a drama and English perspective, we don't really focus on those things. We don't reflect on the habits that we have when we're with patients. So I think we can square that circle by be clear about what we're trying to test and why, making sure feedback is part of every assessment journey. I think learners will learn to trust us much more as a consequence. And I think technology, if we get it right, can actually capture some of that opportunity to give video feedback.
Yeah. So we got 3 more questions.
I'm still awake. Go for it.
Yeah. So one question is actually coming from Dr. Nilesh about phase 1. Phase 1 meaning medical sciences. Yeah. In fact, when he put that question, I was thinking, are we also neglecting this group? Because there is this focus that we're thinking, okay, we need to take care of those in clinical years. They are the most affected. And because we are assessing them for knowledge, right? They should, they should be fine for now. So I think his question is about, it's about assessing clinical reasoning. I mean, what can we do with assessments with the preclinical students? Just some comments on that.
Yeah, these guys are still capable of taking clinical, I mean, partly because you still use elements of problem-based learning. You're almost more naturally there than some institutions. And I look at very, very junior learners, and they can engage with clinical problems, perhaps at a less sophisticated level, but they can still engage with them and look at complexity. They're bright learners. That's why it's the pleasure of recruiting them and admitting them and working with them. But we can give them much more complex problems and go off and solve some of those things. So it's not just about, you know, as Gradgrind says in Dickens, and Trudy Roberts really often quotes this. I really like it. It's sort of facts, 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 facts. That's all we're interested in. But we're not. That's not how we learn. It's not how they learn. So we can give them real life clinical problems that are appropriate for their stage, and they often surprise us. We can let them go off and actually look for solutions. I think one of the neglected areas in health professions for me is about projects. So the more scholarly end of our academic endeavors. And we don't talk a lot about those. Lots of other higher education disciplines use project-based work much more actively than we do. So I think we can engage them. Decision-making and reasoning, well, again, to cite Jeff Norman, you can only teach people a decision-making model. So if you're teaching decision-making, you're often saying, well, this is how people think. I think one of the really useful things about technology and connectivity, and we've been playing around with some podcast series to look at that, is, well, how do we think? How do we take the tacit and make it explicit? And I now have an age where I can reflect back on my time as a student and a junior doctor, clearly 1,000 years ago for those of us who can see me on screen. But you saw your teacher, you saw your supervising consultant, you thought, wow, how did they make that diagnosis? And often there wasn't a lot of magic behind it, but they never really told you. Whereas actually almost interrogating and saying, well, what's your reasoning? What are you thinking about here? What are the things that you're looking at when you're seeing a patient? And how are you shaping and pulling all these bits and pieces together? And I think that ability to stop and interrogate us is really useful. And in fact, we were practicing a little bit of that on the ward round on Monday evening for a complex case with somebody who was with us from a stroke perspective, but is likely to have deeper seated infection and inflammation. And the three of us were sort of crowded around the screen actually, and I was almost talking aloud. This is what I'm looking at. This is what I'm thinking about. It was helpful because I was showing people how I was thinking, but it was allowing other people to think and influence me too. So I thought it was much more Socratic on both sides. And I think we can do that with junior learners. We can get them to start to think about the how and the why and what does this mean.
So just moving on from that, I think before we come to that last question of the future gazing is from us actually asking about, I suppose there's a place for proctoring and there's a place for non-proctoring, maybe, depending on the context, right? So she's asking, do you see non-proctored online exams as actually opportunities? And this relates to what you just said, to assess collaborative skills in authentic environments.
I think it's, yeah. Brilliant questioner, thank you. You probably saw from my slide and my head in my hands that what I think about a lot of what's being talked about from a proctoring perspective. It's really depressing at the moment, some of the language. We have a little medical and dental assessment research group here in Liverpool, and a colleague shared a blog post which unfortunately revealed that one online proctoring company had managed to lose tens of thousands of records, sensitive data about a proctored exam. How awful is that? And we do not think about data security in this. We sign up to this thing where effectively I lock down your browser and somebody watches you and all of those bits and pieces. You know, as I said, it's the minority report of assessment where I'm monitored and checked at every level. And they lost that data. I think that's really, really quite shocking. I think the issue about proctoring is all about trust, isn't it? It's trust in ourselves as well as our learners. And there's almost that perception that everybody cheats. Well, so if we put that to one side, and I'm not sure that is the case, it's almost letting people do an exam and learn how to take the exam without needing to cheat. We invest in language that's about professionalism, that's about our expectation of them. And we actually design assessments that are actually quite difficult to cheat. So if we expect that people are going to collaborate and chat to each other, then we actually, this comes back to the open book test. We design tests that purposely engage that say, actually, what we're doing with this test, we want you to go away and talk to other people and do this from a groupthink perspective. If and Amir Sam from Imperial produced some really nice work suggesting that they were the first people to really talk about in the first phase COVID emergency how their online testing had gone, and effectively they just put the test online, ran it against the clock, and there wasn't detectable significant assessment malpractice. And I think to a certain extent, we almost need to go through some of this experience from a proctoring perspective to know what works and what doesn't, to be able to retreat away from it, but actually show the information that actually there's not, when the test is designed well, there are fewer opportunities to cheat. There is a public confidence issue though. So I think we just need to get that level right.
Correct.
The messaging, the design, we explored a lot of thinking around that in Liverpool because we deferred knowledge tests for a reason. And we decided in the end we weren't going to go for very expensive proctoring. And there were two big reasons about that. And the first one was about the social. The students being faced by somebody who wasn't a faculty member, they didn't know them, didn't know the system, sat on their shoulder watching, just felt very, very uncomfortable. And we just used some Zoom breakout rooms, and we were able to have our camera off, their camera on, and just watch them get on.
Right.
And what was fascinating in that was two things. They got really comfortable with us. We could have a chat in advance. We could relax them. They looked much more relaxed in that kind of environment. And it was interesting just watching them with my camera off. It was a very, very different experience from a pen and paper test in an exam hall. And there's some very new work that I just saw this week that suggested that kind of approach to testing, there's less student anxiety behind it. Yep. It also fulfills some of the ideas of the panopticon and Foucault's work around, if I'm being watched or I perceive I'm being watched, it's just enough to mediate my behavior. We ran tests where everybody took the same test, but it was randomized. So we all started at a different point in the test. So I couldn't run to the loo and ring my friend and say, what do you think question one is? Because my question one and his question one were entirely different. Yeah. And guess what? We told the students about that. So when we first said we were going to test like this, it was a bit depressing to start with, but we responded by saying, actually, it made the tacit explicit. We talked about, well, this is why we're doing it. This is how it will run. We know what you're worried about. So we've designed the test like this. Yeah. And what was interesting is the student noise just went zunk. Yeah. So coming on to non-proctored, I would agree, because I think there's an opportunity to learn how to test take in a much more relaxed way. So from a formative assessment for learning perspective, I think we can encourage testing that looks at much more collaborative based solutions. And we need to think about how do we design assessment which allows people to do that. So maybe we put all the students in a Zoom breakout room. It is the escape room of testing, and say, well, actually you work together, you come up with a shared solution. And we actually permit that kind of activity. Sure.
Yeah, I think what you just described with the non-proctoring for others who are not in IMU, for the proctoring, is what we do in IMU. So I think Liverpool and IMU have been thinking alike. If we didn't buy any program or from an external vendor, we actually have breakout rooms and observe and shuffle the questions. And honestly, it's working out better this way, rather than all that anxiety that came with data privacy. So the last question that I have, and I know we are living in times where we don't even know what's going to happen for Christmas, or even
tomorrow. Yes.
Tomorrow, oh God, who knows who's going to be the president of the United States of America, and that's but
scary times.
Scary times. But maybe with assessments, it's a bit easier for you, Richard. So what do you sort of predict would be the next best assessment methods, right? That it's going to come up in 21, LRF2020, maybe the next 1 or 2 years, what would be these assessment methods that will be used more in health professions training? Yeah.
So I don't think we are going to see a massive shift in the tools that we already use. If you look at the pace that we change and we adopt innovation in education, and particularly health professions, we're massively conservative. And as I alluded to, academic institutions are almost glacial in their adoption of change. So I think it will be more of the same. I think we may see some shifts. I hope we will see more workplace-based assessment. I think also that assessment systems will change. I think the one thing that the last few months has taught us is that assessment systems that use a much more thoughtful, programmatic approach have probably weathered the storm a little bit more effectively. So I think we'll see more people perhaps trying to grapple with what that means. But again, that can take months and years to change the culture. And to what extent even programmatic assessments can programmatic assessment systems can weather what's going on at the moment, because it's not just a few months of disruption. This is going to be years, plural. There are lots of issues about missed learning, missed clinical placements, the need to catch up. So I think there'll be a challenge for them. I think for me, where I would love to see people starting to pilot and build things around open book testing, which we've talked about. People instantly jump to the idea of, well, I can't set the standard. Well, let's at least start by doing that in an assessment for learning type context. How can we really build confidence in these types of approaches from a pilot phase? But also some, I guess, starting to think about how we capture those human-only traits that Gert Leonhard talks about, and perhaps see care, compassion, a little bit more focused in our routine language about assessment. So I'm less hopeful about the latter. I think we're still very much focused on competency and technical, whereas what I really, really value, what I know patients, my own patients value, is that care, that creativity. So I just think if we can take stock of actually what we're testing with our existing tools, that would also be a really, really good thing. I think I've reflected on this in a different presentation, but I think the one thing I think that has been really different for a lot of places is about communication. For the first time ever, we've been able to pause the conveyor belt and really communicate effectively with our learners and our candidates about testing. And I think that's been quite a great thing for me. I worry that we'll lose it as we just return back to how things were. But in some ways, the longer that COVID goes on, this is a really rather depressing thing. I think we might break some of those habits of the past. So long answer, there isn't a magic bullet I see ahead of us, but certainly open book testing, I think, for me would be and that's why I cited it, I think is the thing we really need to engage with. Otherwise, doing what we do better.
Yep. Thanks so much. I think, to be honest, for those who know, it's actually now 5 something, I think, right? And in the morning for you. Yeah. And so a really great early morning reflection. And we thank you very much, Richard, for being with us and sending lots of warmth and sunshine all to you, right? From Malaysia, because
thank you. Well, it's about 3 degrees outside, and yesterday we had the sort of that warmth and Malaysian food is always welcome. Thank you.
Yes. So thank you, and thank you to the audience, because you have been really engaging with us, and thanks for your time. I'm sorry we overran for about 10 minutes, I think, but I think it was well worth the session. So thank you very much, everyone. Over to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the invite and the questions too. It's been brilliant.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Prof. Richard, for a very insightful talk. Thank you, Prof. Vishna and Ms. Zabiba, for their enthusiastic facilitation of this session. Next, in the program is a workshop entitled Virtual Learning, Best Practices in Engaging Online Learning, which will be presented by Dr. Luin Mi Ai and Dr. Ho Ket Lee. So please continue to stay online for this workshop. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Win and Dr. Ho Ket Lee to share their screen. Dr. Luin and Dr. Ho Kat Lee, you may share your screen now.
Dr. Luin is supposed to start first, so probably she should share the screen first before me. Is Dr. Luin in?
I think maybe Dr. Luin have some difficulties, so we will play a short video for you.
Walking through Body Interact, you see three main menus: Home, Training Center, and Setting. In the Home section under Your Patients, there's a list of cases available to you, which you can easily filter to find a specific patient type. To get started with a new simulation, just pick a scenario, adjust the time, and click Start. In the simulation, you'll feel like you're in a real emergency room and you're in charge of managing this patient. Take a closer look at the patient's face or legs by adjusting the viewable options here. So what can you do? Have a dialogue with the patient to understand their symptoms, what happened, and to learn their clinical history.
I'm feeling weak.
Physical examination following the ABCDE assessment.
Go. So hi, so today we are going to have our Learning Resources Festival. So this is the setup for today. So if you can see, we are arranging all the laptops over here. And This is the main area for our today event. So we have our friend over here, Fazil. Fazil, say something to the camera.
Busy.
Busy. Come, let's go. We meet our videography team. So this is the official videographer team. So you have Nasrul over here. Nasrul, say hi to the camera. Hi. So we have Ladri over here. We have Mr. Sain. Mr. Sain, say hi to the camera. So, everything's ready. Yeah, we are ready for today's event. So hopefully, things get well.
Thank you very much for those kind introductory words.
So basically, actually I learned this kind of what you call method of presenting from Tuku Azman. Tuku Azman is like my mentor for presenting.
Batchmates, yeah. So why is it not in?
Good afternoon. Can somebody confirm if you can see my screen and hear me?
Yes, Dr. Kekli, everything loud and clear.
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry for the delay in the sessions. Actually, I have discussed with my partner, Dr. Luin, that she will go first before my turn. All right, but she is facing some technical difficulties right now. That's why I will start the session first myself. All right, so the topics assigned to me today is to talk about virtual learning, the best practices in engaging online students. These are the objectives of my talk. And before I start my topics, all right, I would like to give credits to Prof. Vishna, Prof. Peter Pope, the e-learning teams, the module coordinators for my program, and many other people, including students who actually give feedback. And I actually include their feedbacks into these sharing sessions, right? So generally, I look at the virtual learning or online learning in two different modes. I actually have my experience with the virtual learning is mainly divided into either asynchronous classes or synchronous classes. All right. So for asynchronous classes, most of my experience is with the setup of an open distance learning platform. So that's why in my talk or my sharing today, I will practically divide it into an open distance learning setup and a non-open distance learning setup. Both are conducted online. So first of all, I will go through if we have an open and distance learning setup, what do the students expect? All right, these are all feedback coming from students. All right, so the students actually told me that if they are on an open distance learning platform, all right, so they would like to be self-paced and have maximum flexibility. So in that case, all right, there will be no timetable, all right, and for assignments, we actually just give due dates, all right? So the students can finish all the assignments very early in the semesters and submit, all right, as long as they meet the due dates. Second is that they would like the learning portals to be self-explanatory, all right? In short, for the open distance learning students, all right, they want to have as minimal dependence on the lecturer as possible, all right. So if the learning portals are self-explanatory, that they can use it without consulting anybody, that will be the best, okay. So all of them prefer asynchronous learning compared to synchronous learning. And but if they face any problem, they actually expect that they will be able to contact the lecturer as easy as possible. And also the response coming from the lecturer ideally should be instantaneous or as fast as possible. And of course, because they do not have a face-to-face or synchronous sessions with the lecturer, they will prefer to have very, very good learning materials. This is their expectation, all right? And they need a clear deadline for their assignments that they can refer to, because they do not have a timetable. And for my program, we have actually developed the ODL portals or website together with e-learnings and also the educational experts. So we found that these are the following slides. I will show to you what are our efforts in preparing an optimized ODL platform for the students. And these are the features that the students told me that it is very appreciated, okay, by them. One is the infographic kind of design. They prefer this kind of infographics where you can see that every single things you come with some kind of pictures, all right, that they can look at it and then they kind of know what it is about, okay. And process tracking is very important for them. For example, they will be able to know how many activities they are yet to complete, how many activities are yet to start, and so on. Next is videos, right? They prefer to have more videos in the learning materials compared to if we just have slides in it. We need to have a way for them to easily discuss with each other and easily for them to obtain feedback from the lecturers. So for us, what we did is that we actually set up a Padlet according to the different topics. So the students can actually discuss a particular topics under the Padlet. So next is that we need to have a summary of all the assignment and due dates. So as you can see over here, for these particular modules, we actually sum up all the summative assessment that they need to submit. And we state clearly all the due dates that they need to abide to. And the teaching materials is preferably coming in a small chunk compared to we have a big long videos that the students will need to follow. That is because for our open and distance learning programs, it is actually a master teaching programs. So the students are actually working adults. So they want to make sure that the video is short enough that they can finish it, let's say over lunchtime or so. All right, they don't have the luxury to actually sit down and go through a very long learning sessions. That's why we actually cut down each topics into small chunks so that it will be easier for the student to refer to. And under each material, we actually have a short descriptive text to allow the student to understand or allow them to expect what will be delivered inside these particular videos. So that will mentally prepare them for the lectures. And we also have prepared some knowledge check activities. Either it is some reflective writing, some short discussion, or some quizzes for the students to make sure that they are actually on the right track. And of course, because it is open distance learning and the interaction with the students may be lower than what we expect, so that the instruction to use a special software, okay, for example, how to use Teams, how to use Zoom, how to submit assignment and so on, we actually prepare a detailed instruction for the student, just in case they do not know how to use those software. All right, so those that I have mentioned before are our strategies to engage and allow our open and distance learning to be carried out. And again, just to summarize to you, all of our open and distance learning students prefer asynchronous sessions. All right. However, right now, due to the pandemic, we also carry out a lot of online sync classes, which are not for the ODL student. So for the online sync classes, I also actually ask the students, what do they expect? All right. And a lot of the feedback are actually the same as the ODL student. All right. But there are some which are contradicting or special to the student who are actually following the synchronous classes. For example, the students actually prefer more guidance. They prefer to have a timetable where they can actually refer to and pace themselves rather than everything is self-paced. But they still prefer a self-explanatory learning portals, and they prefer synchronous over the asynchronous sessions. But the rest is more or less the same. They prefer to be able to contact their lecturer whenever they want and get quick responses. They still prefer good learning materials, and they actually prefer to have clear deadline for all the assignments. So I can summarize that the difference between ODL and non-ODL students is mainly in how much guidance or flexibility they want, and also their preference for over synchronous or asynchronous sessions. And the rest is more or less the same. So for online synchronous classes, okay, the good learning portals is a must for ODL, and it is preferable for non-ODL student. All right, for ODL student, if you have a bad portals, that is practically done. All right, the learning experience practically will become very bad. But for non-ODL students, if we still can prepare a very good online learning platform, of course, it is much preferred, right? So for my program, both ODL and non-ODL students actually share the same learning portals. All right, so for non-ODL online learning, all right, these are my personal suggestion. All right, for non-ODL online learning, sync classes should be carried out, but should be reduced, right? Instead of 100% of the classes are synchronous, we can probably have, let's say, 50% synchronous and 50% asynchronous. The reason is because the students actually need time, right, to prepare themselves for the classes. So reduce the sync sessions will make the students able to study on their own, and so that the sync sessions, right, will be able to be used to develop higher level skills and gain extra knowledge. Okay, and the sync sessions ideally should not repeat the content or the async material that we already provide. Right, so that is very important. If we actually provide the student with very good asynchronous material, but we repeat the same content during the synchronous class, I believe the students will feel very bored during the synchronous sessions. So ideally, it should not repeat. And so for the remaining 2 slides that I have, all right, I'm not sure if Dr. Lewin is in. If Dr. Lewin is in, she can continue the sessions. But the remaining 2 slides, I would just like to share with you what are the difficulties or benefits that I face when I carry out online synchronous classes. I will go through the difficulty first. All right, maybe later on we can have a discussion, and the audience can actually tell me their difficulties when they do online synchronous classes and how do they actually solve it. So for me, when I carry out online synchronous classes, I find that it is actually more difficult to obtain feedback, especially passive feedbacks. For example, if I carry out a face-to-face class, I can actually see some facial cues of the students. When they do not understand what you are saying, you can see the confused kind of facial expression, all right? And then you will know that they actually do not understand, and you can repeat, or we can actually try to explain with some other examples. But right now, because we cannot see the facial expression, we do not really know whether the students actually are able to follow or not. And sometimes we want to try, or we ask some students to participate, to tell us what they think. A lot of the time, they will just say, sorry, my line is unstable, which I'm not actually sure if it is really due to unstable line or the student just do not want to participate. So that is one, all right? So second difficulties that I face is that some students are quite skeptical of the concept of online learning. So they straight away shut off, okay, especially at the beginning when we start the to go on to online classes. But right now, slowly, a lot of the students who are initially skeptical are more open to the idea. I believe a lot of them are slowly accepting that the online learning, no matter they like it or not, it will probably become a norm. And lastly, I think that it is actually harder to engage students, all right, when we actually need to conduct online synchronous classes. For example, because I cannot see the face of the students, usually for my classes, I like to crack a joke, all right, with the students to break the barriers. But right now, I'm facing my own screen. I can't see the student's face. It feels unnatural for me to try to crack a jokes and things like that. So I just can't bring myself to do it. All right. So maybe later on, some of you can tell me what difficulties you face and how are you able to solve it. And lastly, I think online synchronous classes actually also bring some benefits for us. All right. First is that the students actually, I find that some of them actually are more prone to ask questions. Usually in physical classes, in the face-to-face sessions, the students will actually wait until the very end, after the class is ended, they will come to approach me personally and ask questions. Right now, they seem to be more, maybe because they are behind their computer, they feel safer. So they tend to, more of them could ask questions directly, and some of them can just type their questions in the chat box. So that is one thing which is I appreciate. Second is that we can immediately get a poll, right? For example, ask the student to raise their hand, all right? And I find that sometimes in the face-to-face class, I ask the student to raise their hand. A lot of the students refuse to raise. But in team sessions, if I ask them to raise their hands if they agree, a lot of the time I get 100% response. So it seems that students prefer to click the computer more than physically raising their hands. I get more active feedback, all right? More students will type in the chat box. And lastly, I feel that doing online synchronous sessions is much more convenient, and I actually get a better attendance from the students compared to last time when I was conducting a face-to-face class. So that will be all from me. I appreciate if we can have a more detailed discussion later, but right now I will pass it to Dr. Louis, who is actually ready.
Hi, thank you very much, Dr. Ho. And first of all, I would like to apologize everyone because there was slight technical issue on my side just now. So I was late to join the sessions. So apologies about that. And as a result, Dr. Ho has to start off first. So thank you, Dr. Ho. So okay, so I think my slides is ready now. I hope everyone can see my slide, right?
Yes, it's all viewable and loud and clear, your voice.
Okay,
Very nice
thank you very
background,
much. Okay, thank you very much. And please let me introduce myself first. I'm Nguyen. I am the current program director and also the lecturer from the Master of Public Health program. And today I would like to share the audience about my experiences in, practicing the, possible best strategies in engaging the online students. So sharing you those strategy doesn't mean that I am the expert in this field and I'm not e-learning expert. I'm not an educational expert, but this is something I got to learn as I work along with the ODL team since 2017, because we started off developing the ODL program for our public health, Master of Public Health program in early 2017, and I got to get involved a lot in designing the program and so on and so forth. And later, I took over the PDship from my assessor, and here I am, delivering the ODL program and engaging with the students day to day. Right? So this is my background. So for this section, I would like to share you the best strategies for keeping the students engaged online while either you are teaching or whether you are teaching synchronously or asynchronously. So of course, my experience is more on the master postgraduate students interaction with the postgraduate students. Of course, I also involve a lot in teaching undergraduate students, but as manager who manage the program, I think I see this from the broader perspective when it comes to deal things day to day dealing with the students and engaging them for them to study properly, right? So, and also at the end of the sessions, I would like to exchange the best practices from you also, to what are the best practices you have been practicing, or which one do you think works the best for what type of learning activity, right? Okay, so please let me start with this first tips, the first strategy. So first is knowing your students first. Now, this is very important. So of course you will ask me, how are we supposed to know all our students if it is a large class in a large group setting? Of course, this is more applicable to the small group sessions, right? So depending on the class sizes, I think knowing your students is like beneficial in keeping them engaged with you, right? So especially if it is the small classes, whether it's a PBL or small group sessions, or even our postgraduate level, we still have small group sessions, something like practical session, small group presentations, so on and so forth. So if it is small size, you get to know your students. There is better opportunity to get to know your students, and it is good that you know them by name, right? So once you call someone by name, you will immediately get the attention, and students will be engaged, right? So normally in one of my postgraduate, one of my undergraduate PBL sessions, if I tell the students, oh, I have my attendance sheets and I'm going to call your name and check whether you are able to answer some of the questions or not, then they are very attentive, that knowing that lecturer is going to call my name and she has the name list in front of you. Of course, this is possible in the small group postgraduate level, because in postgraduate studies, we know everyone by name. Because, for example, we have like 20 plus, 30 plus students in our program, then it is possible for you to know everyone's name. But in large group setting, it's impossible. But if you know someone from, from small group, and that you can call name in the large group setting, it will be very, very beneficial. And next is knowing their background, especially in postgraduate. so that you can relate to their experience when you interact with them. For example, someone's working in Klinik Kesehatan, and you are going to apply your teaching to the clinic setting, then you relate to one of your students' experience, and that will capture their attention and they will stay engaged. And also geographical locations, geographical, whether they are from the Africa, or whether they are from Bangladesh, or they are from Malaysia, which part of Malaysia, if you know where they come from, and they feel like, oh, okay, our lecturer knows us, and they will be more engaged, and the feeling of connectedness will be improved, right? So the next is their challenges in attending online classes or learning from distances. So this is one of the practice that we normally do, more of like, getting feedback from them. So whether they are able to join their classes with ease, or whether they have like internet problem, or whether they, especially those who have to, study from, Penang or Johor or Sabah. So we have to be considerate for them. So we cannot assume that everyone is in, Kuala Lumpur, and we have to be considerate for them. In such cases, they will feel more belong to the program, and connectedness will be improved, and you will get more engagement. So that's the first strategy. So my next strategy is build strong relationship with your students. This is very important. But then again, it depends on your role, whether you are the lecturer, whether you are a facilitator, mentor, supervisor, or coordinator, right? So if you're a lecturer, before the start of lecture, proper ice breaking is very important. And I believe this is what IMU is highlighting us all the time, to have proper ice breaking in our video lectures, video lectures, to have the proper ice breaking. Sometimes what I normally do is I join the lectures, or maybe 8 to 5 minutes ahead of the actual lecture time, if it is permits. And I try to speak to the students who are already inside the online classroom, and then you get to exchange experiences, whether they are doing good, or whether everything is all right. And I try to do the similar things at the end of the lecture by making sure that they got to hear what I say, and during the lecture also, I try to ask them whether they can still hear me, or I'm still connected, right? So next is, if you're a facilitator, it's more important, especially in the small group sessions, right? So of course, there are different facilitators who are rotating and teaching the small groups among the students. But at the very beginning of the session, it is very good that students know who you are and what your background is, and also they are actually very interested who is going to facilitate, and whether this person is approachable or responsive or not. So that is something that all students wants to know. Similarly for me, I want to know, when I was young, I wanted to know who my lecturer is, where he is from, what's his expertise, what's his experience, and so on and so forth. Right. So that will also helps in communication with the students in the small group session later on. So the next is, if your role is mentor, it's very important that you have to have a regular communication. Especially in our distance learning, our mentor play a huge role, as even though it's a master program. Sometimes we assume that being the adult learners, they are independent, they need to have their self-discipline, they need to have their own a good time management plan, but still some are still struggling. the main reason is because our adult students, they are working adults. They are working adults, and we have to check with them regularly whether they are progressing on time or whether their performance is all right, and also whether they are progressing according to the timeline. That's very important. Next is supervising. Supervisor. Some of us also play a supervisor role where you have to supervise their dissertation projects. So in that case, also, sometimes what we normally do is we expect students to, because they are working or they are adult students, we expect the students to communicate us first. Sometimes we also need to initiate our communications. That's, for example, if they are quiet for some time, we send our email to check whether everything is all right and show our concern in whether they are all right at work, whether that has impact on their study or not. Right? So next is our coordinator role. So in IMU, you will notice that we have multiple level of coordinating roles. There are module coordinators, we have semester coordinators, we have program coordinators, and so on and so forth. So one of the things that a coordinator needs to ensure is that they engage the students by giving important announcement regularly. The announcements are the information that students should not be missed. Okay, so just like what Dr. Ho just now shared on his slides, so we have multiple channels on our audio platform. Actually, Dr. Ho's program and my program, we have similar audio platforms. So I know what Dr. Ho's program platform will be look like, and it's very similar to mine, right? So we have like multiple announcements tab in the program page, and we at the program level, we have to ensure that students know where to look for the news and latest announcements. And at the module level also, module coordinator has to regularly check whether they have made the important announcement or not, right? And also, sometimes on top of the announcement, we also send the emails, group emails, to ensure that they receive the important announcement, right? So all in all, what's important is building a very good rapport with the students, so that you have a strong, good relationship with the students, which will promote their engagement with either learning or with the program as well, right? So next is building the online community, right? Online community, which is very important. So what we normally do is link the juniors with the seniors. Right? So when the juniors come on board, we introduce the juniors with the seniors group representative, and that helps a lot too. They share their and program experience, which module is what experience they obtain from this module, that module. So it's like they get to know about what challenges, what is coming to them way ahead of what's way ahead of the actual learning activity time. So for example, we make group chat under the Teams, or we also use WhatsApp. So I believe that's a majority of us are using these days, either Teams or WhatsApp groups to for easier communication with the students. So the next is introduction briefing. It's very important too. So let's say when the students join the program, they need to know the program, about the program. And also when they start the module, they need to know about the module as well. So depending on the type of teaching and learning activity, okay, the module coordinator especially will highlight, especially what are the important assessments they have to pay attention to. What is the, especially the exam regulations. Students are very interested in that. What is the exam like? How many assessments are waiting for them before they start the learning? That's what they want to know first. They want to know about the assessments first. Right, so after we introduce them about the learning outcome of the module, we have to tell them what's waiting for them. So in such way, the word exam will certainly capture their attention, and they will be more engaged and start working on that exam, or it can be assessments. Start working on the assessments as early as the first week, and then they will find out what learning activity they have to take first for them to be able to submit that first assessment, right? So, and also module coordinator, they have to show the portal, how the module is like, placed in the portal, what tab they need to click to check module guide, assessment guide, so on and so forth, where to submit the assignments. So in the first module briefing sessions, it will be good if you can show them so that they won't be lost anymore, right? Once the student feel lost, they will get frustrated, and if they get frustrated, they will feel they will lose interest in the study. And that is when you get your, attrition, program attrition rate will be get higher, right? Okay, so of course you have to tell them what's the learning outcome overview and how this module will help them in the workplace. That is another thing they want to know. And by learning this particular module, how will this help me in my job? Okay, so and that will some sort of give them motivation, right? For example, if you teach students the biostatistics, you can straight for me, what I normally tell is, if you learn your biostatistics so well, that this module will help you with your research and also with your dissertations. So once they heard the word dissertation, they know dissertation is a big module and they have to pass this, and then that will capture their attention and you will get more engagement later on, right? Okay. Okay, so the last strategy is tracking their performances and giving feedback to them, right? So tracking the performances will give you overall idea of where your student stands. Right? So we all know this already, and that will give you opportunity to identify the weak students and communicate with them. Right? So we will check whether it is due to because of their, they are struggling with knowing the concept of the content, or whether it's the time issue, time management issue, or whether this is due to personal problems, and we can advise them appropriately if we know their issues, background issue for their low performances. And we can also congratulate to the high performer, and they will be like more motivated to perform better in next exam. Okay. And next is role of mentor in discussing their performance is very important as well. So normally in IMU, we send the results to their mentor as well after every exam, and at the postgraduate teaching in my program, we send the results to their mentor, so that mentor will be aware of their mentee's performance. And like I said, they can communicate and congratulate them for the good performance, and they can call them and show their concern and interest in what's going on with the students, so that you can sort of like help solving the problems and get a better engagement with your students. Okay. So that is my presentation. That's the end of my presentations. And Dr. Ho, Dr. Ho has some, no, okay. Maybe Dr. Ho, or shall I go ahead, or you want to take over to discuss Q&A for your session?
You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So what I would like to, do now is, open the floor, for everyone to, share your experience as well, for whether it's a large group lecture or whether it's a small group session or practical session, how you normally practice to get the attachment, get their engagements and attention. Can we do that? Anyone wants to share?
Can I
Yes,
share something?
please. Yes.
Prof. Shahid here.
Oh, Prof.
Thank
Shahid,
you.
yes, please.
Yeah. Thank you, both of you. Very enlightening and practical experiences that you both have shared is something to learn with your practices. And those are very practical points and nicely highlighted. And I would say keeping eye on such a close eye on ODL delivery that both of you are doing as a director are really applauded. And we wish the other who wants to do DL, ODL should follow you both with such a keen interest and keen analytics that you have brought in and presented. Thank you very much for that, both of you.
Thank you, Prof. Shahid.
Most welcome. So the thing is that when I do my online teaching, ODL has not started yet, but we have been doing, incidentally, it is online, almost everything now, even the face-to-face we cannot deliver. So the conventional is also being delivered online. But we have already done with our ODL preparation and waiting for the accreditation, and we intend to start soon, early next year. But whatever online experience that I got from my teaching, the conventional one online, is that synchronous sessions I like it more than the asynchronous session, because you get directly engaged with the students. And secondly, the most important thing is how do you engage is important, right? So if you come up with a kind of a PowerPoint lecture on ODL in synchronous, that will not be the same as you do it face-to-face. I agree with a lot of Lee has pointed out that you don't get the facial expression and other thing, and you know, how the students are getting your jokes and your delivery of the content and all. But what is important, if you keep them with your, modify your online, when you're delivering online, modify your face-to-face lecture into something which can keep the students engaged. So add on to workshops, seminar, tasks, and that really worked. Give scenario tasks and then bring them back after a breakout session, bring them back or give them some 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or half an hour. It depends what tasks are you giving, and then bring them back and ask them to present, and then that really worked well, and the students have liked it. I have seen they have liked it rather than delivering a PowerPoint, and that doesn't work. My question to you would be that a mentor is one of the necessity in ODL. But who do you select mentor? Are they from those who are teaching, or those who are not teaching? So, how effective did you find in your situation if they were from the teaching lot or facilitating lot, or they were not those who were facilitating in your program?
Okay, so thank you, Prof. Shahid, for the questions. Yes, for the mentor, we assign the mentor, the program assign the mentor to the students, right? So currently, we cannot afford to give the students the chance to pick their own mentor, the mentor they wish to work with. And when we select the mentor, it's from our teaching team. So, for example, they involved in teaching, they also involved in facilitation, they also involved in multi-coordination. So that is our current practice.
Okay, thank you. That's good. That's what I was expecting. But many program would have mentor which are not those who are teaching actually would be not as worth effective as those who are teaching. So they know the program, they know everything, so they will be in a better position to, you know, do the mentorship. Thank you very much for that answer.
Thank you, Prof. So anyone else? Any thing to share based on your experience?
But can I ask the other question?
Yes, please.
From both of you, how do you cater for your psychometric evaluation? But when I say psychometric, don't get driven with the term as something very scary. No, psychometric, what I mean is reliability and validity basically. So considering the a small cohort, considering most of the time that assessment summative we do is assignments. There are few, couple of 3 maybe assignments in one module where the content taught is more assignment. So how do you really claim your reliability and validity? How do you produce the evidence to that? That, yeah, the assessment that you have carried out is really reliable and valid in your program. If you not get the question, I can elaborate it more.
Okay. Dr. Ho, you want to try or shall I answer?
Dr. Nguyen, please go ahead.
Okay, so you can add on if I missed out anything, right? So yes, Prof. Shahid, for our master program, our student size are small, very small compared to undergrad program. So it's like for a module there will be even though there are about 20-25 students at one time, not every students are doing in the same semester or in the same module. So when they take the module, the maximum number of students who take the module at one time may be about average 10, plus or minus, can be plus or minus. So we find it impractical to run psychometric analysis, reliability, and validity because of the size. But what we normally do is we carried out the proper vetting and sort of like standardization before the assessments. That's the only thing we can do currently. Maybe in future when we have collected a number of, quite a number of assessments carried out, and we can later find out the reliability and validity later. But at the moment, because of the class sizes, we cannot do that at the moment. Correctly if I'm wrong, Prof. And so what we did is we vet the assessments questions every year, and we also vet our rubrics, and also we also sort of like standardize among the markers. There are sometimes we use double markers to assess one assessments, and sometimes there are single markers depending on the program. So different program has different arrangement. So there are if there is double markers, we take average marks from both marker and see, and we have to make sure that there is no more than 10% discrepancy of marks given from the both assessors. So that is what we are practicing now, Prof.
Okay, from the Lee?
Luin, yes.
Luin, yeah. You want to say anything?
That's what we are currently doing, Prof.
No. I'm just Catley.
Oh, yeah. Catley.
Yeah.
Catley.
For my program, actually, we didn't do any of those, but we are planning to impose those validation and reliability measurement and component. But currently, we actually do not have those.
Okay. This was what I expected, because it's not possible in a small cohort and doing with mostly assignments to do the reliability, validity statistical tests. But what have been said, the important is to start with the blueprint, number 1. Number 2, vetting has been emphasized already. Number 3 is the look at the rubric. do the standard setting in rubric. Fourth is the collaboration exercise. If you do not have, impose this among the evaluator, do it an exercise available online maybe. If not face-to-face, you can do yearly. And those who have attended this collaboration exercises, workshops, they should be given preference in marking. And finally, standardization. Standardization in terms of inter-rater reliability. This is the only thing you can do within a small number also, right? So at least you can have some statistical tests. You can do ICC, you can do kappa, depending on your tool, whether it is nominal data or it is a continuous data. So kappa or ICC can still be run with a small cohort. So this is the way you can produce some evidences towards psychometric and evaluation on assessment evaluation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Prof. So Dr. Ho, do you have anything to add?
I think nothing else for me, and I think our session's already ended.
Yes, it's time's up already, right?
So thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, both of you.
Us out. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Luing Min Ai and Dr. Ho Ket Lee for sharing the best practices. Today's agendas are now complete. I would like to recap the activities of today. We have listened to a very interesting discussion on remote learning best practices, an insightful talk by Prof. Richard Fuller, and we have participated in engaging workshop. Please be sure to continue joining us tomorrow. As for tomorrow, our final day, we will have a very interesting plenary talk entitled Emerging Roles from Lecturer to Learning Facilitator by a very experienced academic in e-learning, Professor Rozhan Muhammad Idrus. After that, we will continue with a workshop entitled Using Games for Learning, Practical Steps to Get Started. This workshop will be facilitated by our esteemed guest, Mr. Mohsin Memon, a CEO of Memon Corp Immersive Learning. We hope to see you again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Before we go, we would really appreciate your feedback on today's activities. Would everybody go to the online feedback form, which can be accessed by scanning the QR code displayed on the screen, and supply us with your comment. Thank you, and on this note, the day has finished.